study session, and I want to go a little out of order because I'm going to do 9G first because Troy's headed out of town, and so we're talking about staffing changes in the Parks Department, and I don't know if you have any questions for Troy. We gave you some numbers, but I tell you, we've amended those numbers. We forgot to put in the cost for the chemicals. Currently, we have a contract where we hire a third party to do all the spraying for weeds and dandelions, and the plan is to bring that in-house, and it will save us after a year's negative revenue because we need to buy equipment, and in chemicals after that it will start saving us $50-some thousand a year. And so I don't know if you had any particular questions on that. Larry, do they have the updated information?
Mm-hmm.
We had all the personnel and equipment costs, but we forgot to put in the chemicals.
Sorry, did you say this is 9G?
Yeah, I think it
Okay,
is.
at Parks.
Well, it's got the reduced spraying cost of 80, but it's got the additional equipment, 80,500. for
Right,
additional
it does
equipment.
not have the chemicals in it.
Oh, I see, okay.
We forgot to put what we're gonna spray out of the sprayers in the.
Just got the spraying cost.
So this is how we started
Can you
with
pop
this
it up one
was
bigger for the old guys?
a year or so ago, the council had a lot of interest in all the lots that the city has, and
You see it if turn-
where they are, how they're maintained, who takes care of what. So we pulled all the city departments together, we mapped those, and as you know, they're categorized now, and some of them are sold and some of them are retained. But in that process, we started looking at how those lots are mowed and how the turf is treated. And what we found was, amongst all of our departments, it's kind of a hodgepodge. And some lots were maintained by the health department, some by us, some by Public Works, some by community development, some were handed off back and forth. So after a lot of discussion and looking at the locations, the decision was reached that a number of the lots that were in visual places should just be assigned over to the Parks Department. And we found places, for example, well, right here at City Hall, building maintenance had a contractor that mows around City Hall, and we have a crew that mows across the street at Bayless. And it would take us a matter of minutes to come over and zip through City Hall. So we found places where we have a park that we mowed. Adjacent to that was a pump station. And they had a contractor who came out, unlocked the gate, went in, mowed the pump station, sometimes at the same time we're mowing in the park. So it just made sense to try to figure out how to make that more efficient, more effective. And then we also found that, particularly on these lots, they're pretty visual, and having contractors that have only occasional mowing responsibilities, sometimes they just don't look as nice as we'd like. And contractors can do an excellent job, but to a certain extent, they have lots of clients. We tend to be a low-paying client because we bid everything, so we're not usually at the top of their list. So we started to look at the lots that made sense for us to take over, what we pay to contract them, and then what we could do if we assumed some of that work on existing crews and added a third mow crew. So that's what this document shows. We're spending about $108,000 on contracts. You can see up here, staff-wise, we can replace that for about $100,000. And then we needed to buy a bunch of equipment. Initially, we needed a truck, a tractor, a couple mowers, one-time cost to capital up for it. And then also similarly, the spraying cost to spray these lots. There's what we've been paying to spray the lots by individual lot, and here's what our ongoing cost would be. And that's the number that somehow we just didn't get added into your number. But then that would be the ongoing cost with our maintenance. So this is what it shapes up in the first year. To do this, there's a number of changes in our staff that not only allow us to affect this change, but also to be more efficient, particularly in some of our supervision. With EAB coming really hard this year, 1,000 trees being treated, one of our supervisors would take more responsibility there. We'd add another supervisor to help with the overall park maintenance. Troy's been working through all those numbers. So we have a combination of employees who would be, their jobs would be eliminated and other jobs that would be added. So this is how the first year shakes out. This was a number we added back in, the 31,000, and we apologize for that. We just missed it. Troy called like a half an hour ago and said, oh, we forgot that number. So the first year, the cost to the city would be 25,000, and then there's a second year here somewhere. So the second year, we'd be saving $54,000. So there'd be initial cost to capital up, but then we'd save significant money afterwards. It would give us better control over lots that I think are important to the city. We have, as I mentioned, some savings now. We think some of our people can pick up some of this without straining anything else that we have. So that's kind of where we are. We have one employee that is in the park facility technician position. That position would go away. He would be an excellent candidate for the supervisor's position. Previously, he was a park worker too. Those positions are all available. I would feel like he would be somebody we'd want to accommodate within our structure. And we have met with him and talked with him about what's being proposed.
And then Larry, equipment replacement, what's the life expectancy of that equipment that we'd be buying this year?
About maybe 10 years. Yeah. You wouldn't get that lots of places, but we have really good vehicle maintenance here, and the stuff lasts and looks good for a long time. So it isn't something we'd have to do every year.
So the numbers we gave you, we thought we were gonna be profitable year one, but we're
We're not.
not, but we will be year two.
Yeah.
If that
think it
makes
makes-
sense.
yeah.
Any questions for Larry or Troy?
I had some, but you answered them all for me already, so I think it's a great idea.
No, I'm glad to see it. This is something we've talked about for a long time, is all the different mowing
Well, it's
contracts.
part of the, getting our arms around the number of lots the city owned and maintained, and so it's been a couple-year project, to be honest with you.
And everybody sort of worked together on this, and once you see how silly it is to, wave at somebody else who's mowing across the street from you, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Appreciate the sharp pencil and good analysis.
Thank you. Troy did it. All I do is stand up here and talk.
All right. Nothing else on that. I'll let Troy go if you're, before Kate sits back down. Thank you, sir. All right, Mark Ekman.
Mr. Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen, this is generally the time of year that I come before you to present budget numbers, maybe a little bit behind schedule, but still before you turn in the budget. But before I get into the numbers, I'd like to introduce Blaine Phillips. He is our new content coordinator, started on November 7th. Blaine comes to us from the University of Northern Iowa, and he's going to be handling social media, our website, some graphic design work, along with photography and videography if he has his way. I'm going to ask him to go ahead and pass out the handout that I have for you, the pocket folder, which has some information pertaining to our proposed fiscal year 18 budget. The first thing I'm going to direct your attention to is this piece, which is our annual report, which in essence encapsulates the report that I provided you last on August 22nd. Inside are the quarterly milestones that we recounted to you, along with some of the performance indicators, such as the success that we had with sporting events, along with the double-digit increases with our website usage, along with what we were planning to do in fiscal year 17 with the Sports Authority grant that we received from the state of Iowa. With all of that, I had talked to you at length about the social media successes that we had. We really put a focus on that last fiscal year going into this one. And what I was hoping that we were going to be able to reach with Facebook followers is to attain 10,000 followers by the end of September, which I'm happy to say we were able to reach. So we have the third largest following on Facebook of any convention and visitors bureau in the state of Iowa. We're only behind the Greater Des Moines CVB and Quad Cities CVB, which puts us ahead of Cedar Rapids, for instance, on social media as far as Facebook is concerned. We've also turned that success into actually an award that we received in October at the Iowa Tourism Conference. We received the award Outstanding Social Media Execution. And again, that goes back to what we were able to accomplish in fiscal year 16, and actually doesn't have anything to do with the fact that we reached 10,000 followers on Facebook. That was not eligible to be nominated, but certainly something we're going to be pointing to the next time we have a chance to submit an award nomination. Something a little bit more recent that we consulted with the mayor's office about is the fact that the Iowa League of Cities was putting out for rebid the 2018 conference. And originally, Waterloo was awarded that right to host the conference. Something happened. I believe they had a facilities issue, and they asked to host in 2021. So in a scramble, the league put out the request for bids in November for an opportunity to host it a little bit earlier. We did that with a lot of other cities, submitted the bid, and then went in person on January 12th to present. And much to our surprise, certainly pleasant surprise, we were successful in landing the Iowa League of Cities annual conference for 2018. That means that we are hosting only 4 years after we most recently hosted, which I'm sure all of you remember hosting it in 2014. So there's certainly going to be some work to do, but it's certainly a great piece of business because it utilizes a lot of the Mid-America Center available square footage, along with allows us to really show off the community to many of your peers. One other piece that I'd also like to direct your attention to in the right pocket is the document that says Omaha Metropolitan Area Tourism Awards. Something that we have been in conversation with the Omaha CVB along with Sarpy County Tourism is doing something more collaborative with them. Certainly, we have worked with them on hosting the U.S. Olympic swim trials. We wanted to do something that really kind of spoke to the fact that we may be 3 counties, we may be in 2 states, but to the visitor, we represent one destination. And how could we really celebrate that? And what came out of that discussion is the idea of really trying to honor and recognize some of the folks that probably get the least amount of spotlight, least amount of recognition, which would be the frontline people in hotel operations, the front desk staff, for instance. With restaurants and catering, it would be the front of the house, so the servers and bartenders, along with the heart of the house, which would include not only the cooking staff, but dishwashers, people who bust the tables, that type of thing. And then also wrap into that attraction and retail employees in that recognition. And so what we're going to be doing is on Monday, April 24th, we're going to take the occasion to celebrate some of those folks who've done exceptional work. Nominations are being accepted now through March 24th. We're going to have a committee that's jointly appointed from the 3 organizations, look through those, and then find a finalist for all 3 counties, and then from those finalists, select the award recipient. And we do have an MC selected that I think will help us in terms of drawing some media attention. John Oakey with KETV is going to MC. We've already confirmed things with Mayor Walsh and Mayor Stothard that they can be a part of it. We'll be soliciting participation from Sarpy County tourism officials as well. And we think this is going to be a great way of not only celebrate those contributions, but also drive home the message with the media and the general public that a lot of things are driven from visitor spending. A lot of things in terms of quality of life are supported by visitors coming to town, and certainly there wouldn't be like a Slipbuster youth baseball tournament or the U.S. Olympic swim trials happening here without visitors coming in from the outside. Along with that, I would like to kind of dig a little bit deeper into that right pocket and then share with you something that I've done the previous 2 times that I've presented our budget, and that is to show a comp set of 6 other communities in the state of Iowa, and you can see from that comp set where the where we stand in terms of hotel motel tax investment, the budget that these other CVBs have, relative population, the number of hotel rooms that they have in their community, the staff that they have to go out and compete for things like the Iowa League of Cities Conference, along with the percentage of hotel motel tax invested in Bureau and Bureau activities. We've got Ames, Burlington, Cedar Falls, Dubuque, Iowa City, and Waterloo in that comp set. And there's some instances where Council Bluffs falls into that mix where you would expect them to. We're number 3 in population. We do have the 2nd most hotel rooms among those communities. And then for the other side of the equation, our budget skews a little bit towards the bottom, as does our staff size. And then our percentage of hotel motel tax is last at number 7. This is just to show where we sit in the mix of things. We don't use Nebraska communities because they're funded a little bit differently. And we didn't insert Sioux City because their setup is entirely different. They're actually a part of city government and are involved in the management of the Orpheum, the Tyson Center, and other facilities like that. But it does give you a sense of where we sit vis-a-vis some of those folks that we go up against for like the league meeting and sporting events and other activities. With the budget, which is in the very back of that right-hand pocket, we have the proposed budget. And I have to tell you that we've come a long way in terms of developing that, and certainly have tried to listen and be aware of all the things that are impacting you and your decision-making. I was happy to sit down with Council Member Head and Council Member White and talk a little bit in depth about what we were thinking about. Some of the things we're as party to some of the details as some of you were as early on. And when we became aware of some of the constraints as far as the state budget was concerned and how that impacted the city, we made adjustments. And you can see that our request is $25,000, which was fairly modest vis-a-vis where we're coming from and where we sit with our competitors. But I can tell you that if you were to look down into the expenditures, and for instance, the administration, which is close to the bottom, if you look at that total, you'll see to the dollar, that's a status quo subtotal for the budget. We're not increasing our administrative costs $1 in respect to 17 and 18. If you go down a little bit deeper and we'll look at all of the line items and add them up, and I'll direct your attention to page 2, you would find out that it too was a status quo for except essentially 3 line items, which is where we're suggesting that there be greater investment. And the reason that we're suggesting it, and even in these circumstances that you have right now, is because we think that that can become a part of the driver of greater revenue for the city of Council Bluffs. We can cut ourselves until we've eliminated all the red, but where is the new dollars going to come from? And we're hoping that you'll see the wisdom of investing in additional advertising on the digital side, that you'll see the wisdom of some additional dollars for website development so that we can better serve the information that the traveling public is looking for. And last but not least, allow us to get behind properly the Iowa West Fieldhouse. It's a great new venue, but we need to let others know about that, and we need to attract the tournaments and sporting events that will want to come there and choose that as the site for their particular event. And if we can provide some of the incentives necessary, pay down some of the venue costs, that's a part of the mix in terms of attracting those kinds of events and tournaments. Those 3 line items represent the $25,000 that we're asking for in additional dollars. I want to say that we're very appreciative of everything that you do for the Convention and Visitors Bureau and have done. I've only been here for a little over 2 years, but I know that you have gone out of your way to assist us in getting established, paid for some of the expenses in terms of searching for an executive director, which I was so fortunate to be hired for. we continue to need your assistance and want to partner with you in terms of properly promoting Council Bluffs. And I would be happy to certainly hear your comments and your questions if you have any.
Since the budget's tight and you weren't asking for a large increase this year, is there any more discussion or further movement towards trying to find a visible location that the public would have access to, such as a visitor center type setup?
We think about it just about every day and act upon that, an opportunity that might come to the surface as far as getting us in a higher traffic area so we can direct more visitors to attractions, whether they happen to be close to Interstate 80 and 35 or the Mid-America footprint or not. We think if we're closer to the MAC, 8029, and as well as the Iowa West Fieldhouse, we're going to be able to serve the community much, much better. I don't have anything for you right now, but I can tell you that we are, we're looking up every lead. I know that I need to follow up on a couple opportunities this week, but nothing that I can really speak to right now.
Just glad to hear it's on the radar. I think it's the visitor center that we have right now is not very visible. I don't think they get a lot of foot traffic off the interstate, so.
Yeah, if we were to be able to be that visitor center function, for 36% of those folks who stop by at a visitor center decide to extend their stay. And something like 63% then decide to not only stay longer for a couple of hours, they stay overnight or longer. And you're talking about spending an additional $250 per day. So it's really meaningful when we're able to engage visitors, give them a reason to stop, and then have them stay in the area. There's folks on the other side of the river who are quite willing to engage them, to make them stop and create a reason for them to stay either in Omaha or Sarpy County. And unfortunately, we're just not able to as effectively stop those visitors here while they're in the area.
Thank you.
Mark, I see, this Iowa West Fieldhouse thing, the increase to the 12,500. And I think that's obviously a good thing to promote for Council Bluffs, but I see Iowa West Foundation with the number 0 by them. Are they not contributing to any of this? Have you applied for a grant from them? I think this Iowa West Fieldhouse with their name on it, maybe they could at least match the 12.5 and help out with some of that at some point.
We'd like to. We've had that conversation. I think there's an interest by the staff in finding a way of helping us. One of the things that is preventing us, we're not the right type of organization, not the right type of nonprofit. We're not eligible to receive grants directly since we're a 501c6, and we'd have to be a 501c3 to receive dollars. And in the past, when the CVB did receive those dollars, they had another entity act as the pass-through. I don't think that's the end of the conversation with working with Iowa West and finding a way. In fact, it might come through finding that next home for the Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Yeah, they create shelter companies all the time and do stuff that Iowa West can't do, so I would assume they could do that here too.
Yeah, I think we have some ideas on the table. It's just a matter of how they might come together as far as available space, opportunities, kind of matching up with what their strategic plan is for instance, the Mid-America Center footprint.
That'd be great.
Any questions for Mark? Thank you very much, and that is the number we put in the budget, I think, so.
That's why, I just looked and it looked like it was the same. So.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mark. Yeah, I think that's.
All right, Pam Bells is on a plane. No, she's not. Hey, she's off a plane.
Good afternoon. I just want to let you know that tonight on the agenda, item 9C, the Community Development Department is asking for council to start the process of setting up a new urban revitalization area at Valley View. And this is in direct relation to a project that we'd like to talk to you about. So we have the developer here, Pam Belts, who wants to kind of just let you know a little bit about her organization as well as the project. And we'll get that pulled up. It's on page 4. Yeah. Okay. Is it best for me to scroll or
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name's Pamela Bells. I work for Senior Housing Partners, and I'll explain how that's related to Presbyterian Homes and our whole organization. Thank you for giving me a few moments this afternoon to speak with you. Since we have submitted applications for project consideration and been working with staff on the urban revitalization area plan, we thought it appropriate just to give you a brief introduction of who we are and what our goals are with this proposal before we're before you for consideration. So I have just a real quick PowerPoint presentation that I'll run through, and then whatever questions you have, I'm certainly here. And although they changed the time of my flight, they managed to get us here in time, so it all worked out fine. With that, is there a way to make this full screen? Well, that'll probably work.
Make it bigger, Mark.
Wouldn't view have an option
I
for
said,
full
we can
screen?
see it, okay?
Got a call today
So
from Matt
Presbyterian-
Walsh in IT department, which is a little scary. They obviously don't know my capabilities.
Oh, that's giant.
I know, I'm trying to figure out that.
So Presbyterian Homes and Services began in 1955 in Arden Hills, Minnesota, with a land donation by a single member of the community. This was our first community. It was 24 units of assisted living and opened in 1955. My favorite part about the photo are the cars. So Presbyterian Homes and Services is the parent organization. We are a nonprofit, and we have several different entities. That's actually probably fine. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, now you changed. So how do I get to the next page?
On the bottom down there, yeah.
There we go. So Presbyterian Homes and Services is the parent organization. We have Presbyterian Homes Foundation, which is our fundraiser branch, our foundation branch. And within each of our campuses and communities, we offer mission benevolence to help supplement rents for people that need that. So that's a very important part of our mission. Presbyterian Homes in the middle there, the middle box, represents all of our different communities in our operational division. So we have Presbyterian Homes Housing and Assisted Living, which is actually the owner name that you'll see on our applicant. That's one of the entities that sets up campuses, and then once we name a campus, once this campus gets a name, it'll have its own entity. There are local boards that go along with each of those communities, as well as our board that oversees the entire direction of Presbyterian Homes and Services. Another name you'll see on our application is Senior Housing Partners. That is my direct employer, and we are a subsidiary of Presbyterian Homes and Services. Typically, I just say I work for PHS. We are the only nonprofit entity of PHS because we do work for other nationwide senior housing developers as well. So we work with others, and thus the different name. We also have a company named Senior Lifestyle Design, which does all the interior design for our campuses, also works with other clients around the nation, so hence a little bit different name. So that's how the different organizational names that you see fit together, but we'll generally use PHS or Presbyterian Homes as the top one. Our mission is to honor God by enriching lives and touching hearts of older adults. We read these every morning at 9 o'clock just to reinforce that we're all on the same page with where we're going. And we do that by providing more choices and opportunity for older adults to live well. We have a system of values that we keep in front of us every day and really work to strive to meet these goals. And we've got, the board tracks us on each of these through 2 different key result areas. So we very much are in tune to making sure we stay on mission. Senior Housing Partners entity of PHS was started in 1991, and we have acquired or developed 72 campuses, about half for PHS and about half for other faith-based organizations. You can see a few of our statistics there with older adults, employees, and a very strong volunteer base. Part of our mission is to serve those with low or moderate incomes. A third of all our apartments system-wide are income qualified. 20% of those under our roofs are very low income, and 75% of those we serve throughout the community with our home-based meals and assistance services are very low income.
Meaning that they're Medicaid cases?
Some are.
I just wanted to make sure I understood your definition there.
It varies actually from project to project as to
Okay.
what low income exactly means. We can come back to that when we're in the application. This you can't read, but it's a list of the projects that PHS has completed and what types of housing are related and the number of units. It's available for you if you're interested. Just a quick overview of a couple of the projects that I've done the last few years, just to give you an idea of the size and scope of projects that we do. Interlude on the top corner was a specialty transitional care unit attached to a 4-story specialty hospital. Folkestone in Wayzata was 5 city blocks, a redevelopment of a blighted area with all different sorts of housing, about a $292 million project. Woodland Hill in Hudson, Wisconsin, just over the border from Minnesota, is more what I would call our bread and butter project, where it's senior apartments, town center, memory care, assisted living, with a future care center to be added. The same with Menominee Falls, Dixon Hollow, represented right next to it. That would also be a mini continuum with senior housing, assisted memory care, with a future for skilled care. Couple just pictures of Interlude. This is the 5-block area of Wayzata, of Folkestone in Wayzata. It does have a couple of unusual components for us with a hotel and office space and quite a bit of retail as well as some market rate apartments too. I keep losing this little cursor thing. That's a shot of one of the blocks of Folkestone. Another one of the interior. One of the big components, you'll see the pool down on the left corner. Not all of our projects have pools, but all of our projects have what PHS has branded a Wings Wellness Center. We've realized that it's really important to all of our lives and our longevity to stay in shape, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual. And so our Wings Wellness areas are for cardio equipment classes, yoga, strength training, balance classes, and a very important part of our philosophy. This is a site plan for Dixon Hollow and Menominee Falls, the kind of peachy area, our senior apartments, town center, and assisted living, the phase 1 of assisted living. The yellow is a church. The Brookfield Community Church was in a position of needing to, with a decreasing congregation and needing to find a new home that they could maybe kind of have a rebirth and grow again. So they sold their property and moved in with us. So we built as part of our campus a church for them. The orange is a future assisted living and care center, and the little buildings in the corner are future brownstones or basically another form of independent apartments. So, and that campus has a very prairie kind of style to it, a little bit darker, but a very prairie style. Prairie style, a lighter version of prairie style is what we are looking at in our proposal for this campus in Council Bluffs, with a main town hall center that kind of has a feature walkway. You'll see a similar look to that in this project. This is one of the community room, chapel. Come on, get there. Woodland Hill in Hudson is actually property that we purchased from the local hospital. We've had a partnership with them on a couple of our campuses for a number of years, and Hudson, as an aging community, was in need of housing and a dialysis unit. So we built, attached to this building, a DaVita dialysis center, with the hospital being just right across the parking lot. Come on, click. This is the site plan for the project that we're proposing here in Council Bluffs, right on Valley View Drive. We're planning on building it. The proposal is to build it all as one phase. So we would have town center, independent apartments, assisted living memory care, and a 72-bed care center come online all at once with future growth potential for more independent units, which at this time, the market study doesn't indicate are needed above the 36 that we've proposed. It's got a ring road that goes all the way around it and feature landscape areas that, some of which will also are proposed to be planted in prairie. This is a rendering SketchUp plan of the building. The independent senior apartments have a ground level garage and then 3 stories of apartments above. The town center is a 2-story structure, as is the assisted living and memory care, and actually the care center, which is a little different construction type in steel, but still a 2-story structure. So most of the building is 2-story, with just the independent wing being 4. Come on, click, click. A rendering of the front of the building, the main portico share, entry to town center, again, the 2-story kind of prairie style look. You can see right through the vestibule of the front entry and out the back here in this, where the big tall windows are, to an outdoor patio and water feature. Many community campus activities would take place back in the backyard here. Click. Oh, end of show. Okay. That was the last slide. So that was just a quick overview. The project that we're proposing has 210 total density, with 36 independent, 24 assisted, 18 assisted living memory care, and a 72-bed care center that we would divide into 4 neighborhoods, so it doesn't feel quite so big. Neighborhoods of 18, one of which would be memory care, and then some 60 proposed future units that would be built upon market demand. I certainly am here and available for questions, but just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce myself. I'll be serving as the project developer for this project, which means I will own it now and forever. So I'll be with you all the way through the process and beyond. So thank you.
It looks really nice. That's an exciting addition. Yeah,
Thank you. We're very excited to be here.
Certainly a need,
for sure. Without
certainly a
doubt.
need, and
Yeah.
very, welcome to our community.
I'd just like to say that in my family, immediate family, in the last 2 months, we've had to make a decision that had to take a family member to another community because we didn't have this type of facility available. So I'm really excited to see it. There's definitely.
Yeah, especially with the memory care portion too. I think that's really important. So I think.
Any other questions? Thank
Ju-
you. Yep.
Excellent presentation. Just an observation, and mostly for Public Works. Seems like just from the scope of the project, along with the new housing development, Valley View also deals with the traffic for Iowa West and College View Elementary. So that's becoming a very heavily traveled and at times a very rough road to drive on regularly. And so we might be well taken in doing a study with a view to seeing whether or not we need improvements on Valley View Road in order to accommodate all this activity in the future. So just an observation.
Yeah, we'll look at it. Probably not a lot of traffic generated, though, from the facility, is there, other than employees and?
Staff for the care center use especially is where you'd see traffic. Will generate about 95 full-time employee equivalents, which would be more than 95 workers, with a lot of those being part-time positions. We're actually really excited to see Iowa Western next door because they've got programs in culinary, engineering, and nursing, which will fit well for employee opportunities with us.
95 is a good number of employees. So.
Yeah, it is. And just judging from the amount of traffic, that access road and the highway that serves Risen Sun, they have pretty much the same type of facilities as you do here. Great compliment to what's been done out there. And so that, I'd say, they generate a fair amount of traffic out there too, so maybe worth taking a look at.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're off on to reviewing the agenda. Is there any questions on the consent agenda? Anything on the ordinances for first consideration?
Did you want?
Oh, public
handle-
hearings, I'm
yeah.
sorry, I
I
went
don't know
by
if you were doing
public.
that last for, on purpose.
Do we
or-
want to go
Yeah, we
to
can go
the
through
others
everything else.
first, or leave the budget for last, or?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's-
anything on the public hearings or,
Other than the budget.
Other than the budget,
yeah,
maybe,
anything on the ordinances for first? Ordinance for third? Anything on the resolutions?
I would anticipate that we're going to have a fairly lengthy discussion on 9A as well, the West Broadway reconstruction. Just up to everyone's call, how many of the hostages we continue to hold.
Well, most probably had to stay for the budget, though. you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so
They don't do the
we
budget
might want
first.
to do the budget last, and
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
so should we talk about 9A then? Is that,
we can do that now, or we
yeah.
can.
I think we might as well.
Do we have any other resolutions or applications for permits and cancellations anyone want to talk about?
I do know.
I didn't.
I don't think so.
So I guess then we're up to 2 topics, really?
Okay.
Okay.
So 9A maybe to start?
Well, let's,
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't, yeah, it depends on how long you're gonna go. I mean, we have staff here for budget questions
Let's say,
anyhow,
should we do
so
the
it
budget
isn't like we're
first?
holding them.
Well, I mean, I don't think that 9A should take that
All right.
long, will it?
For
But-
now,
I mean, I think
tonight it
different, but yeah.
probably will, I imagine,
Right,
but
but-
tonight, today,
So I'm trying to understand, and I've talked with a couple of you about it today. I see it as one deal, I guess, with if we're going to approve the engineering services for phase two of the master plan has medians in it. So, to me, and I realize that the master plan can't be amended tonight because it's not on the agenda. However, I plan on bringing it back forward the next council meeting. I guess, I mean, in talking with Dick, I don't know how, I don't see it as different if I'm planning on taking, I would like to make a proposal to have an alternative solution to the medians. So I don't see how we can approve phase two, I guess, with medians in it if these public, tonight, all these people from as our constituency is gonna come talk to us. If we approve it the way it is with all this opposition, are we gonna is it gonna cost us money to change it down the road? Or should we just wait?
I actually talked to
it's-
Ron's here. I saw, maybe, before we get too far down the line, I think it would be helpful, Ron, if you could come up maybe and reiterate what you and I'm sure everybody else had. Because it was helpful to me, because I was not sure like where we're at and the length of time and all that before medians and that topic comes up. From the understanding we had, I think what you told me was helpful. For one thing, yeah,
Ron
start
Tinkup,
with this.
HGM Associates. The first part of this contract will be just to get the contract started and get negotiated. So we've got, I don't know what time, weeks or months to get the contract negotiated, then get survey done. So we won't be starting design of median stuff for, I don't know, a couple months down the road, I would guess. So I don't want the contract to help any longer because there's a lot of stuff that has to be done behind the scenes. Surveying, locating utilities, find out where utilities have moved to. So that has nothing to do with the medians, and the median stuff is down the road a little bit yet. It's not gonna happen for the first couple of months.
And you said that obviously that's gonna come from the direction of the city, what you're gonna do, the medians.
Correct.
So, I mean, tonight, we're truly approving just the contract to award HGM the contract for this phase too, but we're not telling them what it's gonna entail per se. I mean, there's the master plan right now that gives you guidance.
Right.
But you're not gonna even really look at that for a while, because first you have to do so much with utilities and, I mean,
That'd be my understanding. You can check with your staff, but it'll be a while before we get to that part of it, yes.
And then I think, if there's a proposal to be brought forward to change the currently approved master plan, well, it's certainly your prerogative to bring it forward. And then we can discuss whether we're going to change course on that, And then I'd encourage you, I'd said it to you personally, but so other people know what I said to you. I'd encourage you as part of that to remember that there has been an 80% move by those proponents, including me. So I would expect just to be fair, I would suspect a significant move towards the concerns of, if there was an intent to try to get people like myself to change my mind even further about willing to compromise, that there'd have to be a significant move as far as that first proposal of addressing some of the concerns and wish lists of people like myself who've already given up 80%.
Yeah, and I know what you're talking about, but just for the audience, can you
Yeah.
kind of, that,
Sure.
what, 80%?
Oh, sure, sorry.
80% reduction.
The median does not, and some people are, I don't know, ironically is the right word, but some people are concerned about the current proposal because it's not the whole way, or nearly the whole way, median. I never wanted exactly 100%, and I'm sorry, Ron, I didn't mean to keep
I
you
think
there.
you said.
I never wanted exactly 100%, but I wanted, and there are a good number of people who do, want far more medians than the current proposal, which there were a lot of concerns based on the public meetings, and a lot of legitimate concern. I agree. There's that they were pared back to only 20% of the total. So that 2.8, let's say, mile long stretch that we currently have the lane that often people drive in the middle, even though that's not legal to do that. They use it as a travel lane. The current proposal in the master plan, which is approved, as we sit here, only has medians in 20% of that area. And so and all the trees have been removed, so nothing tall. There was a concern by businesses that it would block the sight line of their businesses, which it's a legitimate concern. I hated to see them go, though. So in other words, but a lot of these suggestions are we just need to get rid of them completely. But remember, as part of the negotiations, there were a lot of things that went into the factor of businesses getting along the street getting certain things out of this deal, the taxpayer getting certain things, the residents of that area. It's right now, that was the deal that was passed. If we change it if the goal of individuals is to completely remove one piece they don't like, but they're not willing to give on anything else, and I'm not saying that's their position, but so far I haven't heard anything, I don't see how that's fair to the people who've already given 80% of it away without anything in return. So for example, a lot of business incentives for businesses along the street, would they be giving up those from the taxpayer if they'd get their way on this? I don't want to have that discussion today. I just, as a preface to, if we're going to have that discussion, in fairness, if they come to me and say, you know what, you've given 80%, you need to give 20% too, and I'm going to give you nothing in return, that's not going to be a good opening negotiation. It's going to be a waste of their time, because I'm not going to listen.
And I think you saying this, though, is.
I'm just being very frank.
No.
Yeah.
But I think you starting to explain this is what's, again, making me think, nobody's expecting this tonight, though. I mean,
No,
some
no.
people are, because some people have been part of this anti-median or whatever. They think that it is on their night, so they're coming prepared.
and it's not.
There's a lot of people that are very pro-median, or that maybe either way. They have no idea that this is gonna be a topic tonight. So I just don't think it's fair to try to make a change that's not actually written on our agenda. I think we stick to the fact that tonight, the only question we're being asked is HDM the right contractor for the engineering design or not? It has nothing, I mean, yes, it's for phase two, but to me, it's
But I
not,
encourage you,
it's not a question of, do we have medians or not? It's asking, is this what we want to do the design?
and I'm sorry, I don't
No,
mean to cut
I'm almost done. So, and I'm more than open to talk about medians, but I think that needs to come up next time when it can be printed on the agenda and everybody has a chance to come. And I think Dick and I talked about this briefly too, because I wasn't even sure legally if
That
we
was
could
my
even change it that much tonight, because
I don't
to me,
think so.
we were then voting on something that was not available for the whole public to know about.
And I agree,
and that's,
because we were elected and we took a sworn oath to uphold state laws. And this is, to me, a direct violation of the open meetings law, because you have to post your agenda with the business you're going to do. And I understand that Roger, feels that, well, there's medians in the second phase, so it's all the same thing, but it's not. Because the reason for those laws is to allow people to read what your business is going to be and determine whether or not they want to bring their feedback. Well, that hasn't happened. And, you know, I want to stick to what the agenda topic is, and I'm more than willing to listen to anybody who comes tonight and wants to bring their opinion. I'm willing to listen to that. But as far as any motion that would be outside of what we published on our agenda, I feel is a direct violation.
I profoundly disagree with that, because
Well-
if you bring up an amendment to a resolution that's put on the agenda, or once the resolution is moved by a council member, then another council member has the ability to move for an amendment on that motion.
And if you do that and it substantially changes the substance of the original posted agenda item, it has to go to another meeting.
And it would not, in my opinion. Now, Dick
I don't-
Dick may differ with that, but what we're doing is we're authorizing an agreement which provides for engineering services.
I think we asked Ron Cleveland.
An agreement, which, by the way, I haven't seen, it's not in front of me. And so I would like to know precisely what guidance is it that's going to HGM. They're not clairvoyant, they're going
The
to be, they're
guidance
not going to be
is-
told.
The guidance is, at this time, this is what I want to be really clear about and why I'm frustrated by this. We passed that plan in October of last year, and people came forward, they weren't happy with it. A council member went out, went to the businesses, said, I don't think you know what this is going to do to you. So all that happened in October, is that right? October of last year?
somewhere around there.
So between October last year and then this item coming on our agenda, that's when the rest of the work is done. That's when you bring a resolution with the actual item that you want to change. Because right now, we have a plan in place. If you don't like that plan, then you bring a resolution to change it. But you don't do this, because this is where the people think that government is not transparent. This is what you call coattailing. This is where you take an item that never had anything to do with anything other than this, and you start adding things to it that are going to cost, because you're asking them to bring back a new plan, bring back some alternatives. So now you're spending the taxpayer dollars after the taxpayers already had their opportunity. And everything was done very transparent. You had the public meetings, you had it in the newspaper repeatedly. So when you do this, this is where it becomes not transparent. This is where it looks like you're trying to do something underhanded. And I'm not, that's how the public gets a bad idea of us, is that we suddenly come up with something you didn't tell us about, pass it, and then, well, wait a minute, that wasn't on the agenda. Wait a minute, you didn't tell us this.
Well, I have a slightly different recollection of what occurred last October. Because when we took up this plan and Mr. Sandow raised the concerns, and I began to echo some of the concerns
Well, I didn't hear that.
that he was
I heard you
raising.
say that you lauded our city staff and the
Yes, I did,
consultant
and I
for
also
listening and
raised
doing a good
concerns
job.
about the medians and the effect that it
Correct.
would have at business. And at that time, Ms. White, you assured me, like I've heard many other times, that this plan is really only guidance.
Correct.
No,
And you know
that
as well as I do, if you want to direct staff to do something different than we've already given them guidance for, you bring a resolution. You do it properly. You're all about doing everything by the book. Don't be non-transparent. And I really don't understand how you take an issue off the agenda that is about a contract, and then you add these other things to it without letting the public know that's what we're doing and try to claim transparency. What you're doing is making sure that the people that want the medians aren't going to have a chance to go out and get their petition signed and get their people lined up to send hundreds of emails. That's how people will feel about
that
it.
people don't know there's a median in phase two?
Well, they didn't know there was going to be any medians until, they didn't read the newspaper. I'm telling you, this issue wasn't published in the newspaper. The issue of the medians and the plan not only was in the paper, there were public meetings held to inform people. What you're trying to do is push something through without informing the people that you're trying to do that. Why would you not just bring a new resolution in 2 weeks, eliminating the medians, having that published in the paper? If you're not trying to be not transparent, why wouldn't you just bring the right resolution in the
But
first
why I
place?
guess I asked my original question is, I'm still confused as to why, when before, this plan was only a guidance, that can be modified later on by subsequent council actions. And now we're told that,
Subsequent?
no, we have to go back and amend that plan that was approved because
Isn't
that's
that
in
what the
concrete till it's changed.
subsequent council actions are? When we say it can be changed later with council action, that is what the council action is.
I think you have to directly amend the plan. I don't think you can change it by collateral amendment on a separate, albeit very related issue. I think ultimately, I think if you feel very strongly about the medians, fair enough. I think, fair enough, every right. And like I said to you this afternoon, bring a motion, the next meeting, I suggest you do it sooner rather than later, because particularly if you prevail, it would waste a lot of time and money if we change course. We're going to change course after what we decided in October. I think it's better to do it sooner rather than later. I prefer we don't do it, but if we're going to do it, sooner rather than later is prudent.
I'll tell you, Sharon, for you to tell me I'm not being transparent, I think that is ridiculous.
I was told
Well,
this morning
I gotta
that
agree
if I
100%.
didn't, if
And
I didn't vote
Melissa
on
agrees
it.
100%, and Nate.
Then I'm not being transparent.
Yes.
And maybe that's
By
what you're
doing
doing.
it
I don't
this
think
way.
that's your
You're not
intent.
By doing it
operating
this way.
according to the rules of the state of Iowa and the city council policies and procedures.
Then you
And
can never
the
amend
city
a
attorney's
resolution?
telling you
You
the
can,
same
just
thing.
do it
and
the
you're
right way.
Disregarding your city
I
attorney's
talked to
advice.
Dick today.
Well, it's got to be germane, and it's got to be, tonight's issue is the engineer. I will grant you that the issue you raise about medians is highly related, but it's a different issue than
Is there
tonight's
a
issue we're
median in
voting
phase
on.
2 engineering?
Are you gonna-
Absolutely there
Okay.
But
is.
today we're deciding whether HGM.
Are you gonna hire a
gets the-
different-
But tonight, all we are deciding, and I appreciate your contrary argument that they're very interrelated subjects. I agree with you on that. You don't need to convince me of that. But the only thing on the agenda tonight is who we hire. I appreciate what the person's going to be doing is awfully important. And you disagree with the current plan as to a piece of it that they're going to be doing, namely about medians. All I'm suggesting is that issue that needs to be directly on the agenda. So if you want that issue, then bring a motion at the next meeting, which is your right, to change the master plan. I agree, the plan's a suggestion, but if and until we change it, it's the plan. So at the next meeting, bring a motion, we'll discuss changing the plan, then everybody out there, pro and con, can come talk about it.
So
But-
how can we, Nate, how can we award engineering services if it's not set in stone then? If it's not a plan, if it's just a plan, how can we tell them, oh, go ahead and get started?
No.
Well, we might change it later.
If and until you change the law, it's the plan. But all we're deciding tonight is the identity of the entity which will implement that part of the plan.
So don't you
That's
think
all
we
we're
should
doing.
set it in
The
stone
plan's
before we
not-
do that?
No, the plan was already set in stone in
it is.
October, if and until we change it. But tonight's just with the identity of the entity that will do the engineering for the project, for Phase 2.
So if you couldn't make the change, if you couldn't make the amendment, would you choose a different engineering firm? Because that would be germane. That would be the question. We're talking about who is the engineering firm going to be? So the medians being
No,
a
I'm not
part
telling you I
of
would
the.
change the engineering firm, absolutely
But
not.
that's the only
Well,
issue up
that's the
to.
only issue that we have on, that's the only issue we've
I
published.
appreciate you
Is
want to
it?
bring the other
Is
issue.
Yes.
it the only issue? Because what it says here is that the mayor and city clerk are authorized and directed to execute an agreement with HGM.
To hire
Right, to
HGM.
And the contract for engineering services is attached.
And reading through that,
Yes.
they're going to be provided guidance on what it is that
Well, of course.
they're to plan.
Of course, and we've
So-
already passed that if and until you change it.
Right.
Okay. Now, before we get all emotional again here, I wanted to suggest that compromise position to try and do
All right.
what it is that we're talking about here.
Okay.
And I suggest a simple amendment to the resolution that asks HGM to plan it, give us the plan specifications and anticipated costs with the medians, and one without.
And that's the idea you have that will save taxpayer money. To do
That's,
two plans.
it's a heck of a lot better than coming back after they provide a set of plans and specifications and we ask them to change.
Well, let me ask
We
that
wouldn't have to
question.
get to that
Ron,
point,
could
though.
you come back up for just a minute? Because I do have a question about that. how quickly can an engineering firm respond if this council in 2 weeks chose to remove the medians? How quickly could you respond to removing those from the plans? And would there be a great cost to the taxpayers to remove the medians from the plan?
And if you told us in 2 weeks, I'd say the cost would be zero.
Okay, if we told you in 30 days?
Still zero.
Okay, if we said, bring us back a whole new plan, one with medians, one without medians. Design something that's gonna make Broadway look really great, that's going to keep the pedestrian, traffic safe, it's gonna, all the things that we've talked about. How much would that cost, and how long would that take?
To design both with median and without.
With and without.
I'm not sure what the cost difference, there'd be differential in cost, I don't know what that'd be offhand.
Okay, because what I'm hearing, what you had said to me earlier is they have to bring an alternative plan, right?
Well, I think you may have been answering a slightly different question you asked, but then again, it could just be the problems in my head, which is possible. There would be a cost difference in building with or without medians, depending on if you didn't do medians and you did something else. But the cost to draw up plans
Yes.
with medians and without medians, to do two proposals would presumably, you wouldn't do one of them for free, and I presumably.
Correct, there'd be a differential cost, it wouldn't, I'm not sure the magnitude.
It'd be tough to guess at this point.
10,000, it's not, in the whole scheme of things, it wouldn't be a lot of money, but it would cost more, there's no.
'Cause you would expect to get paid for doing-
The plans we have now are just a master plan that shows the overall layout of the facility as it is. Now we're gonna take each segment at a time and design the details of how wide that is, how many plants you put in, specifying the sprinkler system and all that. So that takes some time to put that together.
Sure.
So there would be a cost, it would not be a large cost compared to the whole overall cost, but it would be additional cost to do it both ways.
Okay.
And the idea here is, we discussed this before, when we were discussing the master plan and whatnot, as we've been going along this for a long time, been talking about the relative cost for maintenance, snow removal. There's advantages and disadvantages to doing everything in terms of equipment, labor, what are your costs anticipated to be over the long term? And by having those comparative sets of plans, possibilities, it gives a better opportunity to weigh what those costs and what those advantages and disadvantages could be.
We did that. We brought all those numbers forward when we did the original plan. I mean, this is an attempt to
plannings.
yeah.
Well, part of the
For
idea is,
convention
once we have a plan, I hope that, the way is, there are, well, I don't know about plenty, but there are at least a couple elements of various master plans I personally don't like, which is probably the case in the nature of compromise. There's probably something that we would each do differently. I know I would. But the thing is if I don't like it and I don't have the votes to change the plan, to discuss it at each and every phase of a multi-phase plan, I mean, I just don't think that's sound policy, because for example, if year 2 and 3, the council that year decides that it's a good idea to have the medians, and year 4 they don't, and year 5 they do.
That's a good possibility, Nate.
Well, but you're going to have, that defeats the whole purpose of having a plan where the people driving along the street suddenly don't, depending on who was on council that year, suddenly at every block, the plan changes
So then is it not
substantially.
a plan that can be changed?
It
'Cause
can if you
council's
get
gonna
the,
change.
but that's my point.
By
If you're gonna,
resolution.
if you're gonna change the overall plan, you've got to have the votes to do it. You can't attack it on a piecemeal basis on each phase. You've got to change it on the whole plan.
Frankly, you didn't like the plan in October, and you've had since October to bring
Exactly.
this. And,
Right.
and now you're waiting until
And I
the
voted
12th
for
hour.
I voted for phase 1 because there wasn't a median in
Yeah.
phase 1.
And you said
Now we're
that-
bringing phase 2. There is a median.
But why wouldn't
Please-
you just brought a resolution sometime between October and now to change the plan?
Well, he still can do it,
You still can do it, but I'm just
Correct.
saying, why would you?
but bring
not-
bring it, and then we can have that discussion. But tonight, to have that discussion,
For you to not say that engineering services has a direct correlation with the master plan of phase 2
Ask your attorney.
that has
Ask
medians.
your attorney.
Dick, please elaborate.
I told you earlier today that if you made that motion wanting to amend the project so there would not be medians, we could not take final action on it tonight.
Correct.
So we would cause a delay.
because it's not germane.
Correct. And in
yeah.
two weeks, He just said it wouldn't make a big difference.
I'm
So in-
I just wanted to
no.
ask him, I meant that as a
Roger, I
question.
didn't clarify. I said the cost would make a difference. It does make a difference in our schedule because we need to get surveys started, we need to get
I see,
utility
I see,
research
thank
done.
you.
So we gotta start doing work on we gotta get the contract negotiated still. So 2 weeks hurts us from the overall schedule. It won't hurt from what we spend doing the design of those pieces, because that piece is down the road a little ways. But we need to get started with our survey and get started on the field to get gathering data for it. So we need to get started on the project.
So ultimately, it comes down to this. If you have the votes to change the plan, then you do. Then we change the plan moving forward, and then all the pieces can go according to it. And I don't want to change it, but if I'm outvoted, that's our system, I respect it. But if and until you bring that motion and do it that way, we have to keep doing it the way we currently proposed it. That means laws can change, but there's a presumption in the law that if and until you change it, it hasn't changed. And so I prefer we change the overall plan, because otherwise, if we do it phase by phase, every single time we're going to have inconsistencies, we're going to be contradicting the plan. I would much rather, if you're going to ultimately put it this way, I want the medians, the 20% that are left of the idea, but if we're not going to have them, it would be far better for them to not be in any of the remaining phases so that the plan is consistent. Because I would rather lose on all the phases, the medians, and have the consistency of following the plan than do this piecemeal way. I just don't think that's a good way, because then our plans mean nothing. So I think we're having a fight over process, which I don't think in the end, I mean, I'd love to geek out on, but I don't think in the end it solves anything. I think ultimately bring your proposal, which you have every right to do. I'd bring it sooner rather than later, which it doesn't help me to say that. It would be better for me to say, no, take your time and then wait, because it's going to be harder for you to pass it. But in all frankness, as I've always been with you, and all my colleagues, if you want to change it, please bring it sooner rather than later, because if you win, it's in everybody's interest, including the people who don't want the change. If it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Well, and there's another big important component here, is that we've got a commitment for $10 million worth of aesthetic improvements, and it was based on the plan that got passed, and so that entity then needs to go back and decide whether, and as I said in staff meeting today, rather than spend $20 million of taxpayer money to get a blacktop street, I just assume grind it down and put 2 inches of blacktop on the top of it and save the $20 million and spend it somewhere else, so.
Now,
Yeah, I think we need to have that chance to have comment from, if we want to make a change, I think it really needs to be published, and that way we have time for everybody for the 2 weeks or, week or however long leading up to it. to
Correct.
Contact us. I mean, I got a lot of calls today and people that were for meetings that said, wait a minute, we didn't know that was on the agenda, but now we're hearing it is. I would like to talk to you.
Melissa, I have asked numerous times for anybody, Facebook, via email, text, for people to reach out to me and tell me who's in favor of them, a business, a citizen, and I have not had one
Well,
person.
now when they read your Facebook posts, I don't know why they would.
Does it say
But I have
Matt
had
for or against? Reach out to me,
yeah.
and I guarantee you it does.
Well,
I have
Facebook
gotten-
posts
I
are
mean, I
pretty
have gotten ones that are
anti-median,
for it,
so.
and I'm
I
sure-
I
can
have
read them
to.
to you.
well,
They are anti-median, that's my position.
well,
But I
but fair
asked
enough.
for and against.
Yeah, but I don't know why someone would read your posts and then say, oh, I'm
To
gonna,
try and
I'm
sway
gonna
my
call
opinion,
him
just
up
like the
and-
people
yeah.
who are negative trying to sway their opinion?
No, I think most of the time, to be frank, there's confirmation bias, which is the most of the, and I try to remember that myself, most of the emails that an individual receives, you're far more likely, first of all, it's usually 3-to-1 in my experience, against anything, because you generally, when you're against, and myself included, when I'm against something in the past, and I used to
try
come.
harder, absolutely.
Stan, you come, because that's just the nature of human.
Did you see how many people were here for the field house?
But saying
There were
that,
4?
of the 4, if you're for something on an issue, you're far more likely to get the people for it emailing you because of confirmation bias.
Come to order, please.
So the issue of confirmation bias, and by that I mean, I'm far more likely to get the emails in support of it because I'm publicly in support of it. So whenever I say I got a lot of emails for it, which I did, you can, from your point of view, take that with a grain of salt, because you can say, well, Nate, of course you would, because the people who are for it are going to contact you because
I
you're
would
for
think
it.
the people that are against it would contact you, and the people that are for it would contact me.
No, that's not
Complete
how it
opposite.
works.
That's what I would do.
But that's not what happened when
that's
the
not what
first
people
plan
do.
came out. I didn't know that there was a problem with the first plan, until the night we were gonna vote on it. That's when Jeff told me he had a problem with it. He didn't contact me, but
didn't
he had
contact-
contacted you.
He's
You
never
put it on
contacted
your Facebook.
I
We-
contacted Jeff. Jeff didn't contact me.
Correct, that's what I was gonna say. You put it on your Facebook, and I watched your Facebook, because you asked to delay it, and we did, we all agreed to delay it, give you a
Absolutely.
chance. You put it on your Facebook, so I watched your Facebook, not one taker on it. You didn't get anybody upset about it until you went door to door. So then what I have,
I disagree with that.
that is true, because we talked about it. You said, yeah, that's true. You went the day of the meeting.
Absolutely.
And got people upset, which is fine. You're doing your job, what you were elected to do. But what I'm saying was, you have to admit, you didn't get a lot of people reading your Facebook upset about it until you started the petition and going door to door, and that's just a fact.
And I watched
What does it matter when they got
Facebook-
I
upset
watched the
about it?
petition
saying
for
Facebook
3
is not
weeks. They had
end all
92
people's
signatures
opinions.
for 3 weeks. It didn't
I
change.
agree.
much.
I totally agree it's not.
Right. So, I mean, people are contacting me that do want them, and we have to give, if you,
Are you telling me these people that are for the medians didn't know that this was being voted on tonight?
It's not being
It's
voted
not
on.
being
it's
tonight.
not being voted
No,
on
didn't
tonight.
know that the engineering services was being voted on? I'm not
Then
saying
why
medians
would
are
that
not.
worry them?
Well, they would know about that if
There's
they
no
read
reason
the
that would
agenda.
worry them. There's no reason to believe that we were going to vote on something different than what was on the agenda.
Well.
Phase 2.
To either hire this
Or not voting
engineer
on-
or not hire this
Or
engineer.
not voting
That's
on
what's
phase.
on the
I mean,
agenda.
that's the thing, we're really, truly.
Well,
not voting on
let me
phase
give you,
two.
let me give you,
Voting on
let me give you a
who's gonna
related
design it.
example. I think, as you know, and this is an unpopular view, and we don't have the money, so I'm not seriously suggesting it, but because, partly because I don't have it anywhere, I'd be the only one voting for it. I would love to see us expand, as you know. I'm a great believer in spending a lot more money on our public transportation, right? And our buses, and we have something in consent agenda to set for public hearing at the next meeting about the amount of money we do spend. And the ridership doesn't pay, it pays a very small percentage of that, as we all know. Why I bring that up now is because this deals with the street, it deals with public transportation. What if I made a motion tonight to increase the amount of money we spend on our bus system? Because that relates to the road, that relates to the, nobody would have notice of it. I could, if I really wanted to get it through, and if I could get 2 colleagues to go for it, we could get it through tonight, and nobody would know about it. I'm not suggesting you're trying to sneak it through, but what people against the
Well, if you did,
proposal
I'd
will
tell you
see,
wrong.
but people against that change would tell me that in effect, no matter if I intended to do it or not, I snuck it through, even though that wasn't my intention. And so I'm not accusing you of trying to sneak it through. I'm going to say that, you know, the people that voted, we were elected the same day. We had completely different views on this issue. We both got elected. What does that mean? What it means is there are a lot of people on both sides of this issue. And for the people that supported my view and put me in my chair, they would have no idea this is up tonight, just as if people that supported you might not support my idea to expand the bunch of money we spend on buses, even though that would kind of relate to what we're talking about. If I wanted HDM to suddenly design in, to take out a lane of traffic each direction, or to make them high occupancy vehicle lanes like they do in larger cities on the coast. What if I wanted them to do that? I mean, people wouldn't have fair notice of it.
Well, judging.
That's my example.
Judging from the correspondence that I've seen from Mr. Tulipana, Iowa West Foundation was definitely aware that we would be discussing this and considering medians tonight, because they sent an email to each of us suggesting that if we took the medians out, they would be withdrawing their money and going home.
But that was a response
That
to
was
an
based on a
email
Facebook.
from Councilman Sandow. It wasn't from anything in the newspaper. They knew it because he asked the question, right?
We also
Was
had.
I not
Answered his-
supposed to ask the question?
Well,
you
but,
were.
He's
but you
saying
can't,
that everybody knows and everybody.
but how do you default them for answering a question you asked?
Similarly, we also had a guest column in the Non-Pareil yesterday from a former Iowa West board member saying that if we failed to include the medians in our plans, that they would again take their money and go home.
Well, they have every
Now,
right.
absolutely.
Did it say in the article that the council's going to be voting on medians Monday night at 7 o'clock?
Yeah.
It actually did, but it was incorrect. He's not a board member of the Iowa West Foundation, so
No,
he
he
doesn't
said
have that
former.
authority.
Said former.
Doesn't have that authority to commit them one way or the other. I don't know whether they're gonna agree to any changes or not, but it's certainly their prerogative to pull their money. And like I say, if we're just gonna design a blacktop road, and Greg had a heart attack when I said this, because he said we already contracted for phase one, then we might as well just grind off the top 2 inches and put down asphalt and put the 20 million bucks in the bank.
Matt, we just put in front of Target and Dick's, a 5-lane road with a turning lane. The most busiest part of our community at this point is exactly what you're saying you don't want to do. It's a 5-lane road with a turning lane and no medians, right in front of Target and Dick's.
Well,
I'm just saying,
I'd love to argue with you about the medians, because the information sent by Nick Atherton supports them to no end. I got them highlighted. I'm happy to read them to him tonight. But when sales goes up with 80% of the businesses, that's a pretty smart decision, I think, on the part of this council. When property values go up 100%, I think that's a pretty smart decision on this council. When accidents get reduced by 24%, boy, that's an awful smart decision on the part of this council. Nick's got a legitimate concern. Probably Jeff Ballinger's got a legitimate concern. Their impulse businesses, a median in front of their business maybe detrimentally affects the business. Oh, by the way, Nick doesn't have a median in front of his business, nor does any other gas station. Jeff does, and maybe we could make some adjustments there, but other than that, it improves sales, it improves the number of employees, it improves safety. It is a no-lose, I don't think.
Well, depending on which studies it is that you're reading.
I'm reading the 6 studies that the opposition gave me to read. That would be my best argument for you. I could give them my studies and say, hey, my studies are biased. Let me look at your studies. And so I look at the 6 studies that Nick gives me, and I didn't type it in. I cut and pasted it. And these are from Nick Atherton. In general, it's been shown that restriction of left lanes along 2-way roadways on a limited number of clearly defined location improves safety by reducing the number of left turns. There is almost always an increase in the total number of employees in the businesses along these corridors. Property values were indicated to be increasing 7.7%. Specialty retail, fast food, and sit-down restaurants indicate increasing customers per day, indicate gross sales increases, indicate, for whatever reason, I have trouble with that word, property values, after median installations. One common theme in all these studies is that business owners were concerned prior to. In every study it says that, and they did. These are 6 different studies, including Iowa. And Roger at one point says, I want to see what it says in Iowa. Iowa says the same thing. And the studies indicate that it's nothing but good. And so, I guess I'm wholeheartedly in support of it. This is from Iowa. Far more business owners, when surveyed, indicated that their sales had been stable or increased following project completion. The rates of business turnover in the study corridors range from 2.6% to 10% per year, a range below or equal to the business turnover rate in Iowa as a whole, which is 10%. Retail sales for businesses within the case study corridors matched or significantly outpaced sales in their respective communities. Over 80% of business owners surveyed along the business corridors undergone reconstruction indicated their sales had increased or stayed the same. 5% of the businesses did report decreased sales activities after the access points were completed. The major conclusions: business success was not for the most part diminished when access was managed. Access management projects increased safety, decreased crash severity, and reduce the number of crashes. And that's the Iowa study that Roger was looking for, and it was provided to me by the opposition.
And
so it's a pretty good source.
If I may please
I got that
continue,
one
now
this
that I've
morning.
been interrupted in my point, I wish to continue that point, and that is that we agreed to delay this until this evening in order to give business owners and residents a chance to present their petitions and make their comments known. That was the point of delaying this until this evening. And I understand that we can argue up one side and down another
Was that your
about,
intent?
about this study and the other study. And yeah, let's have that discussion, but we also need to hear from the citizens, because at the end of the day, we're not here to represent Iowa West. We're not here to represent the folks that did those studies. We're not here to represent HGM. We're here to represent the homeowners and the business owners that have a stake in this question over there on the west side. And that's the point that I want to come to, that we have that open opportunity for them to make their feelings known, and then
But just the
honestly consider
opposition,
that.
just the
Adjust-
opposition.
yeah,
And
that,
and I will say, I was one that voted to delay. I understood there was concerns. I found out that day about wanting, Jeff had called me the day of the council meeting. I did not have time. It was later in the day to decide, okay, that's fine. Since then, I was able to talk to Ron for one to find out where in the timeline does the medians come into play? Is it right away? Is it important that we know ahead of time? Is it down the road? What's this gonna have as an impact? And also, have talked to Dick about what's the proper way to do this. Since then, trying to figure out, to me, now that we know that, we can approve this. It's not gonna make a difference cost-wise, because as long as we do the proper thing, and at the next meeting, or whatever meeting we pick, bring it back forward as far as the master plan, we can still give the citizens a chance to be heard. We can still make our decision based on that. But yet, we're not continuing to delay this project for another 2 weeks, when really then we're talking a month. I don't think that HGM's not gonna change in my mind. I think they're a great engineering firm. That's what we're deciding tonight.
I don't think that's in question, to be honest with you.
But that's the question, when I read in, after talking to legal, that's the impression I'm under, is that's really the question they're asking us. Is that who you wanna hire? It can still be changed. The plan we're giving them can still be changed if
If
we
and
bring it
until.
forward and if that's the decision.
Well-
And that's what I found out since the last meeting. So to me, I don't see any reason to delay again. I don't think it's proper to change it within this resolution. I think we do it separate, so that everybody does have that opportunity. It's published. No one can say they did or didn't know. It's out there. If you wanna come talk at that meeting, you would get to come talk. But we're not delaying the project any longer either.
And ultimately, and I remember saying this in one of the candidate forums, I think it was the one at the country club, but whichever one it was, ultimately there's three schools of thought. The primary one that I think most people subscribe to in this country is when you get elected, you're not just a complete delegate of you put your finger in the air and decide which one's most popular amongst in the moment, or who's the loudest voice. But you take into account what people think, but you also take into account your own independent judgment. So I'd encourage you, as you look at this, don't just take up a raw tally of who's for it and who's against it, but have that be a factor. I'm not saying ignore it. That's one school of thought. But the middle ground, the Goldilocks school of thought, is you take what people say, but you also take the fact that you're in a privileged position of being able to come to these meetings, have access that most people don't get to the degree that we do in these chairs. And take that and come to your own independent judgment. And there will be times where you'll come to a position that the people for it, often, in my experience, at least with me, and maybe it's just me, but often you'll come to a position where the people that are for it are kind of quiet about it. Often they don't even vote, in my experience. But the people against it sure remember who you are and show up. And that hurts you, but ultimately, you have to go with what you think is right, which is not always what's the most popular at the moment. So, if 10 people show up and 9 of them are against a project and 1's for it, I might still be for it after weighing the evidence. So I don't think the only point I'm bringing up is to have these exercises. Yes, we delayed it so that opponents who wanted more time to bring their information about medians, even though we decided that in October, fine. That's why I went along with agreeing to have the delay. It wasn't that suddenly we were going to reopen the issue of that, because that isn't what was put on the agenda. And now if we want to reopen that, fine, but let's do it the proper way.
Well, understood, and I would agree in large part with what you're saying.
Okay.
And I guess we kind of issued an invitation for those who wanted to come and speak about it to appear tonight.
I don't know we did that.
Well, yes,
opponents,
I think
anyway.
if we go back to the recording of the
I
meeting.
think
that's-
they asked us to withhold the approval on the engineering firm until they could bring their petition.
Well,
That's all the ask was. We didn't say, hey, people, come in and tell us what you think about it.
well, when Roger made the motion and we briefly discussed that, we were inviting them to come in and have an opportunity to express their opinion. And my big concern here is that I do not want to provide the impression, because I think we're going to have a pretty big turnout tonight for people that do want to speak about it, and for us to only provide them that opportunity after we have the vote on this tonight, then that kind of sends a pretty clear signal to them that we're not interested in their opinion. Now, I know your legal position. but
I think they should be able,
that's-
I think they should be able to talk before the vote. I'm with you
I'm
there.
fine with that.
I absolutely, absolutely.
I think we should send a pretty clear message that we're following the laws of the state of Iowa.
I think both of those are true. I think as to what we can vote on, yes, but if somebody wants to speak to us remotely related to that topic before we vote on it, I think they ought to be able to speak.
And we give a little more latitude than most. Most
That's
councils wouldn't even discuss it if it's not on the agenda. People could come and address them.
That's true.
They are not allowed to discuss it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true as well.
I mean, I have no issue. I just think if we really want to vote on whether or not have medians, it needs to come back on the budget, on the agenda as an actual item that stands on its own, not delaying just the hiring of the engineer when we can still, that change can still be made without any cost.
And I think people that would come to speak to us need to know that, because, if I came and didn't know that and we had the vote, I'd think I wasn't heard. I think it's incumbent on us to let people know tonight that, yes, you can come speak on anything you want to your council and mayor. But, if you want us to bring a proposal, it's got to have notice so that everybody, all sides, neutral, all know about it before we could take action. That doesn't mean you can't speak tonight and speak the night that somebody brings a proposal for action. But I think in fairness to them, they need to know, because a lot of people don't understand that rule because it's not intuitive. I wouldn't know it if I hadn't learned it.
Agreed. And
I
I would
think
like them
to be fair to
know,
them, yeah.
because they're coming expecting
Sure,
that
agree.
there would be a decision with regard to medians.
Yeah.
And I
But
think
why
then-
did they think that? That's the thing I'm not clear about.
Because there's medians in phase two. That's why they thought that.
Well, we just need to,
There's
we need,
medians
we
in
need
phase
to,
two engineering.
we need to educate
why.
them onto
Right.
how this works.
So we need to make it clear
Yeah,
to
yeah,
them that we are not being provided an opportunity to vote on the medians tonight,
Agreed.
only with respect to whether or not HGM is going to continue the planning process.
Well, my
Absolutely.
And that's what
intent,
I've told the
and
opponents
I
that called me.
told Roger I'd be flexible with it, I told Nate I'd be flexible with it. My intent was to clearly state, these are the rules and procedures of the city council of Council Bluffs, Iowa, that that is not germane to the topic, and the providing of a petition and comment on the petition, that is perfectly acceptable in citizens requesting to be heard, and that's where we listen to it and hear it, and not commingle it. But again, we provide a lot of latitude here that we don't other places, and so there was some discussion that maybe we should allow that. I said, I'm all right with it. I'm frankly hearing three people that are saying, no, they're not all right with it.
I'm okay with hearing it. I'm just saying, I'm not okay with
If they-
voting on anything other than.
I'm okay with hearing it because it's not strictly speaking germane in my view. I realize some people disagree, but I don't think strictly speaking it's germane. But I don't think people are going to understand that, especially if they've come tonight with the understanding that they are going to be able to do it. For whatever reason, they think that. They clearly think that. It's mistaken, but I don't want them to think they were being silenced. I think we all, me included, have to do a better job of letting folks know how the rules of how the government works.
Well, I'll
But
tell you,
since-
I told everybody, phase two of engineering services would be voted on tonight. And
Well, that's true,
when I tell people
but
that,
not
they
median.
all know there's medians in phase two.
But that's not the topic actually being voted on, and so that's the
Do
thing.
you understand what I'm saying?
I
They all
do.
know, so when
I think they misunderstand what you're saying, to be honest with you.
phase two of engineering services is
No.
gonna be voted on tonight?
No, I think people, when they hear that phase two of engineering services, that a phase that involves medians is going to be voted on, I think people hear that as medians are going to be voted on. If they're against medians, they hear the word medians, they hear voted. I just think that's I'm not calling people dumb. I just think that's the logical way to read it if you didn't know otherwise. If I didn't know otherwise, that's how I'd
Well,
understand
And
it.
if you read the contract.
His motives were described as nefarious and.
Well,
and
I have not
the way-
said that.
And the way, yep, and the way you just described it, I think, is a pretty accurate way of putting it, that there is a perception out there in the public, and I think there's some merit to that perception, that that's what we are in effect doing tonight. And we're told that, and now we're being told that the guidance of the plan we're provided now has to be affirmatively amended before we can do anything to the contrary.
I believe it does.
So,
I believe so.
okay, which is a little bit of a change from how it was described at the time that it was voted upon.
I
So,
disagree, but not, be that as it
I
may.
understand, reasonable minds can differ.
Fine.
I'm speaking as to perceptions of the public.
Fair
and
enough.
What they believe is on the line tonight.
Yep.
So I guess I'd say
Contract-
that you misinformed them on what
Right.
the procedures were and that this is the appropriate procedure.
Well,
I
what was
don't
in
think
the
that's
packet?
misinforming at all.
Contract for engineering services, if it were read, you know, if somebody read it, I mean, it clearly lays out what we're expecting. And in that, it also talks about there are several things that will be done, including a preliminary plan, a final plan. I mean, there's a lot of steps in here. I don't,
Dick, when I asked you today if medians were involved in the engineering services of Phase 2, you said they were, correct?
There is a meeting in Phase 2.
The master plan calls for medians to be in Phase 2.
So when we vote on the engineering service, I'm telling you what, when people ask me, we vote on engineering services for Phase 2.
But I
I
think,
asked Dick if there was medians in engineering
they're
services
involved.
with Phase 2.
but it's not germane to the precise issue, which I realize is techno-geek, legal speak.
Yeah, I don't even
But,
understand.
but
I
that's
get it,
something,
but
that's something we have to understand in our positions and then, and explain to
I
people.
understand it, but I mean-
That's just like use my example of the bus thing. Buses will be involved in that, but that's not what we're voting on tonight, right? And now that's a less related example than medians, I'll grant you that. But ultimately, I think you gotta hit an issue square on when we vote on it, I think is the easiest way to explain it to people.
And I understand what you're saying. I mean,
And we gotta, if we're gonna
Dick
change
says
that, we
that's the
gotta
only
hit it
way it can
square
be
on.
done,
Let's hit it square
I
on,
understand what you're saying, but I'll tell you, these people that are coming tonight,
yeah.
and a lot of them I've spoken to, obviously
And
before,
they've
you
been
know that.
misinformed.
I think it's incumbent
I
on
didn't
us.
tell 'em
I think it's,
I didn't tell them we were voting on medians. I told every single one of these people, we're voting on Phase 2 engineering services.
That
That's
involve-
exactly what I told them.
but that involves medians, right?
Absolutely involves me.
Well, but you could see where people could misunderstand that.
I
Well, it involves.
I'm not accusing you of intentionally doing it. I'm saying I think people have understandably or
Well,
misunderstood.
I can
standing it.
assure you,
you know,
to say I'm not doing anything above board is absurd.
Well,
You know-
and I think really we can get past that issue of saying that clearly this is their impression. Clearly on the technical issue, that is an understandable but mistaken belief. It's our job to tell them, look, that's fair enough. It's an issue. We can hit it square on. If you
And
want
I
to
will
say you intend
gladly
to bring it the
bring a
next meeting,
resolution next
you,
meeting.
if that's what you want to do, say that to folks so they know where you're coming from.
I
And then
will
I
let
think
them know.
that's how we can move forward and I don't know what else. I think we're just kind of rehashing old ground otherwise. So can we
And
just
yet-
do that and then move on?
and part of the problem is like the email that Atherton sent, I got it this morning with all the attachments, because I think that they're, because of AOL, it didn't go through, I think you had it forwarded to us. Well, there's no way I've had time to look through everything that was sent and to look at what his points were in that. I haven't even had time to review a vote that involves removing medians, that, because that's not what was on the agenda. And then, I mean, I gave my studies out months ago. So when, you know, the opponents bring opposing studies, I want to review them, I want to read them, I want to listen.
And
But I
there's-
can't get 6 hours.
I can pull out of your studies or Nick's studies, I can pull positives and negatives out of both. We all can. That's.
Well,
mean,
and I think we can have that discussion at the next meeting if you bring that motion. The only thing I was saying is, look, the folks against it, just so you understand where I'm coming from, and they do, because I think it's fair to be upfront with them, is I need to hear what they're going to have to be willing to give an awful lot on things that matter to me and people who agreed with me. about it. It can't just be their way or nothing.
Nate, before,
I'm just being blunt because I
know.
think that's fair to people. They think they're going to win 100%. That's not how politics works.
Nate, I'll tell you that before I bring, and I will bring a resolution next council meeting. However, before I do that, I would invite anybody that is for the medians to call me, email me, sit down with me, because I've had this conversation and I haven't had nobody reach
Well,
out to me.
I'd be glad to put you in touch with some, but as part of it,
greatly
just,
appreciate that.
I just want you in good faith to remember, they've moved 80% with no reciprocity. Didn't expect any, but as part of moving it through, whittled it down. And so I think the first offer in a new round, which kind of your motion would be, as I say it, would have to be, what are they willing to give up? Because so far I've heard nothing.
Well, I understand that perspective.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, they can't expect to get 100% of their way. I
Well-
don't think reasonably.
but I'm trying to put myself into their shoes.
Sure.
And we're not just talking about a handful of business owners. I think we're talking about a large number of business owners, a large number of business dollars, and a large number of residents. And I think why this generates such emotion is that much of their lives are wrapped up so tightly linked to that West Broadway corridor that what we might perceive as minor changes or nuisances to them make a huge difference in their lives. And
Sure.
And I just want to make sure that we give them every opportunity to voice their concern and carefully take this issue head on and consider it, because what we're in effect doing is we're making a decision that will impact their livelihoods, their
Sure.
their
But it-
homes, their families. And I just want to make sure that we have carefully considered everything and given them an opportunity to make their views known.
And fair enough, but as part of that, I need them to consider, for example, the various incentives that, to take
So-
account of the medians that businesses were going to receive to improve their private property adjacent. As
Nate.
part of it, those were partly to make up for the fact that there would be medians. I need them to give up stuff if they're going to get stuff.
So the thing that kind of gets me, and then I'm going to shut up and not say anymore, but the thing that kind of gets me is we put it on Facebook, we got a web page, we went to all the businesses and notified them of the meeting, we held public meetings. Councilman Ringenberg went to the meeting and said, I just want to thank, and I don't want to put words in, lauded their responsiveness to the input that the people gave that cared enough to get up and come to the meetings. And so now we're worried about, and I'm not saying they don't have a voice, but we're saying there's lots and lots of people that lives are dramatically affected. If they were dramatically affected, why wouldn't they come to the meeting and give their input?
They did. That was the number one thing I heard.
And
at
you
that
said that
meeting.
the plan changed.
And it did.
yeah.
And it did, but that doesn't mean that it's the perfect plan, or that the public is happy with all aspects of the plan.
Well, no.
They came and discussed
happen.
the medians at that point in time. I heard it loud and clear at that meeting. I heard it loud and clear at another meeting long time ago that Sharon and I both attended, that was discussed. I've heard it loud and clear in other visits and discussions that I've had with folks well before that point in time. So it's been on their minds a long time, and it's not something that was just stirred up. We just didn't foment rebellion here. This has been something that's on their minds and quite important to folks for a very long time.
Well, and it was questioned in the planning in 2015 when it went to the Planning and Zoning Board. But I'll tell you this, Nate, and
But it
everybody
did
else.
pass.
It did,
I
however,
mean,
I'll
the
tell you this.
conversations were held.
If you're open
I'm open to always
a
to
new
a discussion.
resolution and and
discussion.
listening and
Always.
giving the people that are for the meetings a time to come forward to and reach out to us,
Well,
as well as setting up, not now,
But remembering that proponents for anything always are less than opponents, and I'm probably going to be your biggest spokesman on a proponent for
Correct.
that,
And I
because that's
hope-
something I ran on.
I understand
So
that, and I
you're gonna-
hope, I'm gonna bring a resolution next council meeting to amend the corridor master plan, because it is a plan. Matt Cox was quoted in the paper
Sure.
that said things can change.
That's
Right,
true,
and
but
we
I want to
can't
know what
bring a
you're willing to
resolution
give
to
up,
change it.
to the businesses are willing to give up. Since it's your plan, I'm going to need to know from you, because ultimately, no matter what people say, things pass by what we write and pass.
Correct.
So I'm going to need to know from you, as a gesture of good faith, I'm going to need to know from you, what is a significant move that those business owners, are they willing to give up all their subsidies and other things that
What
were
do you
part?
mean by,
Well, the
What are they
current,
willing
the
to give
current
up?
plan has compromises in it that gives them benefits, that they can't have that and get rid of them. Like any legislation, there are compromises where people get part of a loaf, they give up part of a loaf.
understand, but if the,
They
if the
can't-
constituents, if the constituents are coming out
Mm-hmm.
and saying that this is what we want,
Yeah, and they
your
elected one.
well, either one, yeah.
Yeah.
Both sides.
Yes,
So I agree, let's find compromise. And I
Well, but-
realize you said that's already happened.
that's
Now-
what we have,
now I'll
so I
tell
need
you,
a significant move
just
rather than
because-
just remove them.
And this is Jeff Ballinger's quote, but just because
Oh, it's one
somebody
voice.
showed up, if I had a birthday party for a 12-year-old and the kid showed, and it was at noon, but the kid showed up at 1 o'clock
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, he still gets to play, eat pizza and bowl.
You can't run a government like that, I'm sorry, you can't. You cannot run a government by doing everything right, getting the word out to everybody, getting the public input, holding public meetings, and passing a vote of the council.
And I believe that happened. I truly believe it, but no,
But you
and they,
can't
it
just
said
say,
West
well,
Broadway
it's
was gonna be
a
redone.
little late.
I truly believe there, all that stuff went out and said West Broadway reconstruction is gonna be done.
Well,
No flyer or nobody walked up to a business and said,
well, that's,
West Broadway's gonna be reconstructed,
no,
we're gonna
that's
put a
not
meeting
true.
in front
I'm
of your
afraid
business.
that's not accurate, but the,
I don't believe that was true.
Well,
And so if somebody had
I
said
know
that,
the staff-
I
well, then
think
the staff
back
was lying
then,
to
these
me,
businesses
but-
would have been more involved.
well.
Truly believe that.
Well, the only thing I can tell you is that whoever, Jeff Ballinger or anyone else, is an important voice, but he's one voice and one
I
factor.
agree, and that's why I've asked to see the other side.
Well,
I
but I've
invited-
told you, the other side has already given 80%. So I'm going to need to know what you're willing to give up. And so far, I don't think you are willing to give up anything, which is fine. That's your right to, as a position. But so far, I'm hearing no indication you are willing to seriously consider a move where the businesses in that block don't give up something. If the rest of the taxpayers at large are giving up something that the businesses want, what are they giving up? It can't just be all what Jeff Ballinger wants.
I agree.
Would you guys be at all surprised to find out that I've talked to people that signed your petition, that thought they were signing a petition because Broadway's was gonna, the entire length of Broadway was gonna be a median? I mean, I've talked to
No,
several
I
people.
that's what
wouldn't
the
be
picture
surprised
shows.
because-
That's what the
Because
picture
that's
says.
still anecdotal evidence in a big compile of data.
That's what I
That's
do.
what,
One person pulled out of, let's say, I don't even know the number. One person pulled out, well, that means the petition doesn't matter. I don't think that's true.
no, I don't think that's true at all. I'm saying, I don't know that everybody that was getting the petition signed, you know, sometimes, I think if they were left on a counter, you know, weren't giving a full background explanation that, you know, the medians aren't the full length of West Broadway, it's not gonna be a median from 16th all the way to the river.
I would say not.
Because,
I would say a majority of people are not fully informed of all the information. I
Well,
would
that's
say
true. I have
I
some
was
of my,
surprised, they told me they signed it and they didn't realize.
I have
Oh, I
family,
said that last
some of my family on the West End signed it, and I was at my great, or not great, excuse, she's going to not forgive me now, grandmother, not great grandmother.
She's great in your world.
She's great in my world, thank you, if she's watching. You know, it said she signed it because she didn't want medians the whole length. So, and I said to her, but it's not, and then we talked it through. Now, to be fair, she still didn't much like them, frankly, but it was a rather more nuanced conversation once that she knew that they were down to 20%, that there wouldn't be trees. There were a lot of nuances to the conversation that didn't ultimately change her mind. I have to admit it, because it's true, but did change her. Before she thought, well, that's nuts. Why are you for a median? She could see the other side
Right.
because of the nuances. And I think in this discussion, it's incumbent on us as we go and talk with these people, and including tonight, to give them all the facts, even as I'm trying to model myself, even when they're against my position.
And I'll tell you.
And I think we all have to do that.
And I'll tell you, I will bring forward a different resolution. I understand, and I will explain tonight, when all these people are here, I'll explain what we're voting on, and I understand where Dick's at, I understand where you guys are all at. But I'll tell you that I truly believe that when I bring forth this resolution, I would like to hear the people who voted you, elected you, reach out to me, or I can reach out, just give me information, I will reach out to them, because I know you're big on, they need to come to you. You've said that numerous times.
Absolutely, yeah.
So they can come to me.
Well,
or
the
I
best
can
way
reach
is
out to
for
them.
me to ask them to contact you, and then
Yeah,
they can contact you.
absolutely.
But I'm under no illusions that I'm going to have as many proponents
But I
of
guess,
anything
you know,
contact you.
the one thing that I'm confused about, Roger, is that I know multiple people that contacted me that said you called them and wanted them to come out against it, and they told you, no, they're in favor of it. So don't those people factor in?
I don't think anybody has told me they're in favor. They could not
Hy-Vee
take a
store,
He told me he could not take a
Jason
position.
James,
He told me he could not take a position.
yeah.
Jason, I invited to a meeting of business owners on West Broadway so that he could talk about his position, why he was for it. So I invited a meeting of people against it. I invited the opposition because I wanted to
I'm
understand.
happy to come talk to them.
And
You know,
well,
I
I'm
don't
sure
know
you're
that
gonna talk to
Jason
him tonight.
James is the right person to put in that position that he goes down and defends it, but
No,
I
he was
just
just
know
a
that I've had
proponent of
people
it.
tell me that Roger called me and I told him I wasn't interested in supporting it. And Tom Hannafin,
Tom told me he couldn't take a position
Justin
either.
Schultz.
He actually stood up at Rotary and spoke in favor of it, at Rotary.
I asked him point blank if he could
He
take
called
a
me about
position
it.
and he told me no.
He's in support of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so,
He did, he stood up. Actually, there wasn't even anything on the agenda to bring it up. He just, during that time where you pay $1 to talk.
The only thing I'd encourage part of this discussion is, there's no way to make everybody happy. I think that's to your point. At the same time, you have to look at all the factors and do the best you can to do justice, to do fairness to all the
and I'll
positions.
tell you that's what
So
I'm trying to do.
Well, that's where I'm telling you, those businesses, what are they going to give up in your proposal?
Well,
If I hear nothing in your proposal,
will ask
I'm
them
not.
tonight.
Well, you're the one that's going to be writing it, so ultimately, I need to hear from you. What are you willing to bring forward that's contrary to their position? I need to hear that, or I won't seriously
Tell me
entertain
something
your
that you would
motion.
like them to give up.
Well, for example, the various subsidies where there is the 50-50 match for certain improvements to their property.
The Iowa West is doing, not us, right?
Well,
That's
that
not
comes from the
city.
money if they still give it, which is a
Correct.
whole other
it's
point.
from the city, but frankly, we want that, I think, so.
We
I
want
agree.
it,
It's
we
from
want
Iowa
it, but
West,
see,
right,
but
yeah.
here's the thing.
I agree we want that.
I'd like to
Or what about,
disagree
I'd like
to
to
do
see an accelerated phase of construction then, where maybe some of it's gonna have to close a bit more, so that the taxpayer
and I
in the
would-
community, they're maybe gonna have to have parts of their business blocked off a little bit, so that the other taxpayers, the vast majority
I
of
think
them,
some of these
the
people
other
would be a
businesses in
proponent of
town.
that. I think some of these people
Well,
would be a
if,
proponent of that.
I would be surprised, but maybe. I'd like to accelerate because taking 6 years to do it is not to just help a certain number of businesses on 3 miles of our 300 miles of road in this town. All the other businesses subsidizing that, that's a major subsidy of government money for private business. If they're not willing to have medians, I'm not so willing to subsidize with public money their ongoing business. Because when the street's fixed in front of my house, ask the people on the South First area or the Lower Bennett area. When we fixed their streets, we didn't give them a subsidy when they had to walk far to their house for a year when we fixed their put in a new street. We didn't give them anything.
Right.
So
Lincoln
these
was just-
businesses are already getting a pretty good deal there of having it phased out for so long. What are they giving up?
I think we'll talk about. a little bit of
I
that
need to
tonight.
hear from them what they're
I
willing to
agree,
give up.
and we can move on to the budget. I think we'll talk about that tonight.
But I need to hear
I
that, or
understand their
if it's
position.
just get no medians and nothing else changes, I won't seriously entertain that because that's not a serious proposal to me.
All right,
Okay.
Budget.
budget.
Now on something easy.
Oh, boy.
So this was my question.
I have to laugh. That's all I've got, Ron.
What if we don't have time to get through
Do we
all
have
of
food?
it? We just would do it next, I mean.
What,
I guess
the
we'll see what
budget?
happens, yeah.
Roger's already asked if we can take it out 2 more weeks.
Yeah, I asked if we
Can
could.
I give you something, because Roger found this mistake, and so we want to kind of show you.
I'm not
This
used to
new
it.
one drives me nuts.
It's,
This is what Dan gave us last year, and this is an amended page.
want this one?
Well, there's one for each one. Roger said it looked like road use tax money was going down.
Here,
And we knew that wasn't true, and so we did some research. And if you go to page 58 in your budget,
I don't know if she needs that. There you go, Melissa.
and that's the new 58 I just handed you.
Okay.
And then look at, did everybody get one of these? Look at, this page was from the fiscal 17 budget. At one time, we paid the employee benefits for Public Works out of the benefit levy, and now they're being paid out of the road use tax.
I don't want to interrupt, Mayor. Did Mr. Finnegan just run away? I'm going to have a question for him.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sorry, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
wait, there's 258, I'm confused, now hold on.
So this is
Before you take that,
17.
There's
This
two
is,
58s, which 58 are we supposed to replace? Because I have this, what's this?
There, on 58, 58 and 64 are to be replaced in your
Okay.
58 and 64 in your budget deal.
We got one
Okay,
page. They got two, yeah, we need.
so then what's this 58?
this, that's 17.
Thank you. Are we not meant to have this?
Yes.
Oh, we
I
are.
just want to kind of show you what happened.
That's your new ones. These are my new ones.
Oh, these are the new ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's yours.
So we quit paying employee benefits out of the benefit levy, and Greg started paying them out of the road use tax. And so if you look in there, in year 14, there's $1,200,000 in transfers in. That's employee benefits coming in 14. $1,238,000 in 15, nothing in 16. And then,
Page 58.
and then on your original sheet that's wrong, it shows $1,700,000. And that was a notation Dan had in his notes that we don't know why.
Okay,
But we carried that in and then carried it across, and Roger said, it looks like, and we'd put it in year 17, it was in year 17, so it looked like we had 9 million of road use tax revenue and went down to 7.5 million. That 1,700,000 did not belong in there, and so we took it out. And if you do the math on the one that Dan handed out, he does not even have a column for transfers in because we quit using it. And if you take the total revenues and subtract out the transfers in, it matches up to the number Dan has in there for total revenues that he gave you last year. So if you take the 7.714 million and 14 and subtract $1,200,000, you'll get the 6,176,000. If you take the 7,933,000 and subtract out the 1,238,000 and 15, you'll get the 6,346,000. Dan just cleaned all that up and balanced it back so you wouldn't have questions on it, because we're no longer pulling that out. So the amended one takes that 1,700,000 out and more accurately reflects actually what's going on, and so,
So road use tax is going down a little bit.
Yeah.
Not up.
Yeah.
Or not
Yeah.
down 2 million.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
okay.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
All
right,
We
so
we
any other
may,
questions?
we may have some other
sure.
minor whoops in there.
I don't doubt it a bit.
And I posed a number of questions to Wendy Schultz, and she kindly worked on that very hard and got back to me. And I was asking about anomalies in the budgeted numbers for the local option sales tax. And her response back to me said, well, the numbers that were accounted for originally didn't include the state contribution from the flood relief reimbursements, which is a totally different pot of money. And so that then kind of reopens the question as to what is the anomaly in these numbers?
Well, and I think that, one, it's it's not a science, it's an art, and people do budgets differently. So it's, until you get the same person doing it consistently over multiple years, it's really tough to compare patterns, and, you know, that's what I did for a living. That's what bankers do, is they look for deviations from standards. And so we may not have done it the exact same way Dan did it. We did it how we think is right, and we now have two sales tax sources that we didn't used to have. One is the regular penny sales tax that we split with the county and the city. But now we have a second sales tax source, which is 65% of the incremental increase of the 5 cents that the state collects. So for the flood mitigation program, sales tax are 7%, 1 cent goes to the schools, 1 goes to local government, 5 goes to the state. And under this flood mitigation program, any increase in that, cities can claw back 65% of to use for flood mitigation purposes if they're approved and allowed to be in the program. And so I think that's what you're saying, that you looked at it and in a sales tax environment that is at best stable rather than going down, how do we go up 2 million in sales tax? And the way we go up 2 million in sales tax is because we have a secondary sales tax source. And we just accounted for it as local option sales tax. It may be state option sales tax and should be accounted for some different way, but that's just how we looked at it. And again, it's not a science. It's,
Well, I understand, and I guess to be more specific about it, those numbers also show up in the reports that go back to the state, not just in the budget numbers that were provided to us for analysis. That's also what goes back into, so if I were the state auditor and I was looking at this, I'd ask, what do you mean?
a valid question, and we tell him just what I told you.
And so, yeah, I guess I
don't know that we can just put it in a sock and hide it now. I think we got to.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. I just, in trying to understand the numbers here and where sources of revenues are coming from, I just want to make sure that I understand.
Yeah, and it might be government transfers in, I don't know how you account for it. And like I say, every little accountant does something better. I guess we could call the state and ask what their best practice is, but it's sales tax, so we put it under sales tax. Maybe it's a government allocation that belongs somewhere else, and we can certainly look into it.
Well, and it just wasn't whether or not that the numbers added up. It also then carries over to our conversation about the CIP, because all these funding sources then affect what's available for use within the CIP, and that's something that Dan Jordet went to great pains to try and do when he put together our last CIP, that he wanted to make sure that there was a clear tie between revenue sources and how a given project was to be funded in order to ensure that we were being responsible in our planning process. There was some other questions I had, and I guess if maybe
you have one in particular for John, or?
Yeah, I did. And thanks for redirecting my attention so I don't keep John here more than necessary. And I asked for, and you kindly provided me the payroll information. And one of the categories on that was on, you had rate and then annual pay. And I just wanted to nail down here, is that just salary, or is that also benefits on top?
That's just salary.
Just salary?
That's just their base salary, yep.
Okay. So in the instance, and I'm not picking on any individual employee, but just for kind of ballpark purposes, like for Mr. Wade or Ms. Schultz, they're going from about 101,000 per year this year to 121,000.
That's not exactly right, because I think her salary was 118 something last year.
When I went back through, the salary information that I received last year, that's where I thought I
But
was
at the
trying to.
time, at 365 days ago, that probably would have been true, but
I'd have to look at the information, Al. I don't know. I don't have that information in front of me.
I know in
When
recent
did you send that? Do you remember?
times, that her salary, she
Oh,
is
that's-
paid comparatively to the people she manages.
Well, and it wasn't as to that specific position. I'm just citing that because, for round number purposes, we're going in 1 year from $100,000 to $120,000, which I'm no math major, but, that's a pretty good bump. And I just wanted to make sure that I was reading those numbers between last year and this year accurately. So that was the reason for my question. Is this salary or is this salary and benefits?
Yeah, and the salary from this year, I can tell you is correct if you're reading it off that sheet. I don't remember what last year's number was. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you the time frame.
Okay, well, I'll drop by and bring you what Dan gave me.
Well, I can answer the question, if getting at, Wendy Schultz is the chief of staff. She manages basically all the city departments, and so I have the authority to increase her grade, and we increased it equivalent to all the people she manages. And I would tell you, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to pay a female employee a reduced rate compared to her male counterparts. That's just not how I work, but.
Well, no, Mr. Mayor, that's not where I'm going on this. And I guess
And so at some point, 6 months through the year, her pay became commensurate with the people that she oversees.
And I'd add, if I could add to that, I think initially, I wasn't here when Matt appointed Wendy to the chief of staff position. I think the human resources people at that time didn't really understand what the position entailed because they basically moved her into a position paid commensurate with an administrative secretary position, and then made some other minor adjustment to that, not commensurate to really what her responsibilities were. And I think there's a lot of confusion in what her role was.
allow me,
what the
if I may, to
appropriate
change
compensation would be.
the focus of my question, because I think we got diverted on Wendy Schultz, and I don't want to make this specific to her, because I just wanted to make sure that when I saw the numbers, I was reading this correctly, because her position is roughly equivalent to that of Mr. Wade's. Sorry, Dick, I'm not picking on you either. But in looking at the numbers, we had the same bump up last year to this year. So that's just what triggered the question in my mind.
I don't know. Dick's always been our highest paid employee.
Well, I'm just reading off the salary numbers here that were given to me. I'm just asking why the difference between the number last year and this year. That's all I'm asking.
Between Ms. Schultz's number last year and this year?
Just, let's take Dick's position, because the question is why the level of bump up for those positions, say $100,000 plus, we're calculating based upon step increases and the 2.5% that we gave to the labor unions, so that adds up to a percentage. And if we apply that across the board, then I look at some of the salaries last year to this year, it appears to add up to more than that percentage.
I think Mr. Wade's position would be 2.5% higher than it was last year, if you look at his numbers. Is that what you're asking?
I'd tell you, Al, that every department head, this was a Tom Hannafin philosophy, every department head got paid exactly the same. And so when you look through those numbers, you'll see that. I think pretty much universally, we may have one person that isn't.
Yeah, they're in the same pay grade, so depending on which step, if they get to the top step, then they're all paid the same at that point, and I believe that's the number that Dick Wade is paid. I think that's the number Wendy Schultz is paid. So.
And unless we increase the grades, which I would advocate, because I would think, in my mind, that a supervisor gets paid more than the people they supervise, but that isn't how it is, and Dick pointed that out to me, and so we are paying her commensurate with the people she supervises.
Last year, just like we do with the unions, Mr. Ringberg, for the non-union folks, I bring a proposal to you guys of, here's what I'm recommending for a increase to the wages. And that's what happens with any non-union employees too. So that scale moved 2.5% last year, and that would be the change from Mr. Wade's salary last year to this year. And I believe it was 2.5% that we did last year.
Okay, well, I'm just interested in the numbers, not on any specific individuals, but the level of increase that's taking place here, not to question the policy. I just want to make sure I understand the numbers here, because as has been pointed out many times, the personnel costs as a percentage of any budget are more than significant. And so I just wanted to make sure that I understand that level of significance as we go through employee pay increases.
Okay.
So that's the sole reason for my question.
Very good.
I'll get back with you tomorrow and show you what Dan gave me last year, and I look forward to the discussion.
I just think Dick's been at the top
And
of
again,
his
if you ask Dan
grade
for the base salaries, then we're going to compare apples
20
to apples.
years.
And that's not to pick on any particular employee. I'm drawing those out because they're right around 100,000. As I read it last year, going to 120,000, that just triggered the question in my mind.
Yeah, and if you have a number in front of you that says Dick Wade's salary last year was 100,000, I'll tell you that information is incorrect.
Okay.
So, but yeah, come by my office and I'll be happy
I
to.
did 3 different budgets. So, you know, I don't know if you're.
Right.
I mean, accumulative or.
So if you look at, Mr. Wade's a great example in that regard. So if you look at for most people on those last 3 columns to the right, there's no information. But Mr. Wade has 3 different budget codes that he's accounted to.
Yep.
And probably Dan gave you each budget code what the total was, and so a majority of it goes to one budget item. Okay, well, yeah, the office up by my office because it's.
Fair enough, fair enough. Didn't mean to spark controversy about any individuals. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the numbers
Absolutely.
as you gave them to me.
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Sure.
I know we have more questions, I'm sure, but I will tell you, I'm gonna make a motion to postpone approving the budget until next meeting, because I talked to Matt. That's only the second one I've ever seen. I do have a lot more questions, and I told Matt I haven't taken enough time to sit down with him and talk about it either, so until we hire a new finance director, and, you know, I know that's in the plans and different things, but I'm gonna make a motion to postpone.
Yeah.
So.
I
And we
think
have
the mayor
till the
said we still have
15th.
plenty of time.
Yeah,
if
we have till the
do.
15th.
Want to answer as many questions as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem. I'm a great believer if a colleague needs more time and we have it,
Right,
I
we
wouldn't
don't-
deny that
The
opportunity.
15th, so we got 2 days after.
So our meeting's the 13th. yeah.
And
Yes,
Matt
okay. Yeah, that's
said he
fine
can
with
walk
that.
across the street in 3 minutes, so.
Absolutely.
Well, in the old days. Might be a 5-minute trip.
No worries.
And thank you, John.
Sure.
I haven't, it's something entirely different to raise and put out there for consideration. And I'm hesitant to raise it, but I think it needs to be raised for a little bit of a public discussion, because I think we're gonna hear about it pretty quickly. I've already heard a lot about this. I've heard a number of business people talking about this and being quite animated when they do it. And I understand that a number of businesses out there are beginning to receive notices from the county assessor indicating that their business assessments are escalating, shall we say, politely, dramatically.
I think dramatically is 8%, if the number's right.
I-
Now, some are up more and some are down.
I was gonna say, that's not 8 across, right?
Eight's the overall total according to the assessor.
Okay?
The average or?
Yeah.
And so that's where we may need some clarification, because at least based upon what I've been hearing anecdotally, some of these assessments
I think,
are going to be much, much higher.
Patty, what'd you say, the golf course went from 200 to 700?
I say, I thought some seemed.
Yeah, so some are
What's
high.
like, do we know what?
Half in Nebraska's.
And the point of me raising this is, I would like some clarity, and I realize that we're dealing with different jurisdictions and different schedules. But why I think this is important is because if we are risking if there is a risk of a number of business owners facing fairly dramatic increases in their assessments, that this could have a marketable impact upon whether or not those businesses can continue. And that in turn is going to drive vacancies, it's going to drive jobs, not to mention how productive these buildings remain in the future. We could see a pretty heavy impact, and that impact would largely render a lot of this budget analysis moot if we don't have some clarity on what we think the anticipated impact of these assessment changes are. And I know that there's an intergovernmental committee set up to oversee the assessor, and that they have input or insight into this process. And I believe all the boards of supervisors sit on it. School boards all have the representatives. All the cities have representation through their mayors. And so I think that this is something that we need some clarification on, because if there is a significant across-the-board impact, we need to know that, understand it, because that's going to throw our budget analysis, that's going to throw a significant curve into how we're predicting our future financial condition.
All right, so I just tell you one, as you probably know, Iowa runs 18 months in arrears, and so it won't have any impact on this year's budget. It will have an impact on next year's budget. I've been told by Bill Keeley is the assessor. He hired a firm to go reassess all the commercial property. No residential was affected. He told me the average increase was 8%. Patty brought in a deal the other day on our golf course that went from 200 to 700, I think.
Right, it was significant. But the tax valuations, as Matt just said, do not affect this budget that you're looking at tonight. These valuations are from January 1st, 16. And, from a valuation standpoint, we've heard enough conversation in Omaha, but if someone does, their taxes or their valuations up exceptionally, they can appeal those. And there will be probably exceptions, and I'm sure the county is prepared to deal with that. But this budget is based on the valuations that are currently in effect as of January 1st, 16.
Oh, I understand, but I mean in terms of business impact, have, this is going to quite quickly if, and I hate to digress, but I've heard, gosh, I think I've had 4 business owners so far indicate to me that their assessments went up anywhere between 40% and 100%. And that's pretty startling. And while it may not have a direct impact in terms of numbers allocated, numbers taken in next year, we can expect a pretty significant business impact down the road. And that impact is as bad as I think it could be. We need to start planning for that eventuality. It's like you see those floodwaters coming down the river, and you don't wait till you're neck deep in water to say, we might want to start putting out sandbags. You try and get out ahead of that and plan for it as much as possible. And so that's where I'm going for.
Well, I tell you that, that the system's set up so that I can't go to the assessor and get special treatment for people I think. So if somebody gets a high assessment, I can't go say, that guy was a big financial supporter of my campaign, let's cut him some slack. And so, that, I don't know, that isn't the controls that board that oversees him. I would tell you that because they knew there'd be some pushback in their budget, they allocated more money for appeals, for attorney's expense. And so they're assuming that multiple people will appeal those assessments. And
What caused them to hire an outside assessor?
I know,
I'm just out of curiosity. Not that it matters. I was just curious.
Well, you know, I think it's a either or type scenario. If you don't do it for a while, they do what's called the equalization, and they calculate the average sales in a yearly time frame and compare up the average sale to the assessed value, and then they unilaterally raise everybody the same amount based on the difference in the average sale. And so I think that
And that happened about a decade ago, didn't it?
Okay.
Pretty substantially across the
Yeah, I was just
if you
curious.
do this
residential.
assessment, is probably fairer. Some people are assessed too high, some are too low. They did, everybody in the county internally through the assessor's office, they hired a firm to do it in Council Bluffs because just the sheer volume.
I was just curious.
And he told me the average is 8.8 or something increase.
They
few we saw that were-
reassessed all the residential property in
81.
81?
Well,
Yeah,
like
somewhat up
like I
a lot.
say, Jeff,
Mine
our,
doubled.
our golf course went
Mine
up
doubled.
300%, so.
And
Mine
that's-
went up, but I
Property tax
increased this.
And that's kind of what I'm going for here is right now, there's an indication, you know, that they were pushing or that we expected a lower number. In fact, there may be a substantial number of businesses that have a number that's much higher. And I'm just saying that if a business, and I can think of a lot of businesses, you know, particularly all those small businesses over on West Broadway that we were just talking about, you know, if they see a 80, 100% increase in their commercial property taxes, that's going to be a vacant building. And and you replicate that a number of times across the city, and we're not only going to lose assessed business property value at some point, that's going to get transferred onto residential taxpayers at some point, and we begin a spiral downhill that's very difficult to climb out of. So I'm really trying to make sure that we are cautious in our estimates about the future, that we understand the potential implications that it can have for businesses and for the community as a whole.
Yeah, I just would encourage people, if they think they're unfairly assessed, to appeal them, and you can either do that through the state or you can do it locally, and I would tell you, in most cases, those appeals are fairly successful, so.
They tend, and the only, and I don't know, and only in this context is this good news, but, you know, this is a problem on the other side of the river presently as well. So at the very least, we're not at a disadvantage vis-à-vis Nebraska taxation on this
Except we pay a
issue.
little higher commercial rate than
Well,
what they do.
on this issue, their residential has also gone up. I forget, the average was double digits in Omaha and Lincoln. They did both. I'm
But
not
he
saying
was
that's,
not directed to do a reassessment. I mean, it's his job, and he decided that it was time to do it, so.
Well, aren't they mandated? I mean, is he just trying to stay within his 98% what's Iowa?
Well, yeah,
100% is Iowa, or is it 98?
is it 90? What is it for Iowa?
I just know that they do an
Nebraska
equalization
law on that one,
if
strangely
things start
enough, but-
coming in out of whack, and this would preclude a equalization order.
Because they think then we've gotten sneaky and kept it low on the border, and then Des Moines comes in and whacks us.
I just remember you can't underassess, and, you know, that new gal out in Nebraska had the same issue.
Oh, yeah. That was quite a deal.
Tim, there's more, bud.
Anything on the
freedom.
budget?
Have we talked out? Even I'm tired.
Well, given the fact, I
Usually I
guess,
could
that we're
talk
going to
dead.
come back and
Yeah.
have more questions about
And
it.
again, if you've got questions, sometimes it takes a little research, so
So shouldn't we try to get
sure would appreciate it if you'd
Yep.
give us a call and we'll get you answers. So.
And, yep, and I appreciate
And again,
Wendy's
I
help.
sympathize with you. It's sometimes, it's nice to have the same person preparing the budget, because you can look and see what they did this year and that year. And I would tell you that I did it 3 years ago, Dan did it last year, Patty and Wendy did it this year. And so there's been 4 different hands in 3 years on it, and so, how people look at stuff can be different, and that sales tax maybe is a perfect example. We'll make a call up to the state and see what the right way to handle that is, but we looked at it as all sales tax and put it into sales tax, but maybe it's a governmental transfer that's,
Along the same way,
Transparency and consistency, or
yeah.
as you can hope, or transparency if nothing else.
Well, yeah, and I want to make sure I'm tracking the numbers.
indeed,
And then to complicate things further, I called up last Friday and asked, well, wasn't their intent to put the CIP on the agenda? And it was added. And, because I thought that, well, if we're going to have the budget vote tonight, then we need to take action on the CIP pretty much at the same time, because those two are linked.
Sure, makes sense.
In that, we're trying to match up the numbers.
Yep.
And I'm a little bit concerned about the numbers in the CIP, because the funding sources, as laid out in the abbreviated form for this CIP format, don't line up with the budget at this point. And so I wanted to find out why that was, and then try and get some further explanation on some of those on some of the project descriptions. Because when Dan provided his format to us last year, each project not only had the funding stream for the project, but also a description of what it was, and so we know how it aligned. For instance, for FY 17-18, there's an annotation in here for CD Community Development 18-03, which is river edge improvements, and that's all the line item says. And so I wanted to make sure that I understood, okay, what are we talking about here? Because we've kind of had those series of projects pretty well lined out. What are we funding that we haven't funded before?
and one of the things that I kind of had brought up when we talked about it earlier is that Dan had access to software called Planet, and nobody on staff currently has expertise in that. So why would we go back to the old way of doing it when Dan changed it? Because it would take us a good month, if not longer, to get up to speed on how to use the software, and frankly, we're shorthanded right now, so.
Understand. I just want to make sure that I understand the
Yeah,
descriptions.
we
of
want you
this.
to understand.
And there was another line item out there, this further out, but again, I want to make sure